Uh, I'm the old version of Anthony Edwards. We found him on the street. Molly asked me to welcome you all. So I'm doing that. I'm welcoming you all and just give you the blow by blow what we're going to do today. So we're here. I'm going to share a couple words. We have a film that's been put together beautifully. We're all going to share that. And then we'll have 3 or 4 speakers who know who they are, and they're going to come up. And then we're going to take a break and go over to the atrium and get some food and some drinks and continue our fellowship. And you'll hear from Paul McCrane at that point when people have gotten settled in. And at that point, we'd love to have an open mic in there for people who want to share anything, because that's what we're here to do, is to celebrate Jonathan. And I'm sure as we get going here, a lot of memories and things are going to come up, and we really prize that. And also, on that note, what we have set up is if you don't want to grab a mic and share, John Davison is beautifully set up in Theater 3. They have a locked off camera. They have a person in there, and you can just share directly to camera that. And that's for Molly and the family, everybody, for all of us. Hopefully we'll all be able to share in that later. So please make sure you go to Theater 3 sometime today after we leave here, on your way out or whenever you can, and share a story or anecdote or anything you'd like for Molly and the family, and well, for all of us. So I think that covers it. I'd just like to tell you a quick little Jonathan-ism. Jonathan Kaplan. I was 19 years old. Sally Dennison's office, and I had just finished a reading. And all I can remember is the look on Jonathan's face, the smile. He was lit up. He was happy. He had found what he was looking for, and I remember him actually rubbing his hands together like a happy witch, having found the eye of newt to throw in his cauldron. His enthusiasm is what let you know that you are in the truth. He taught me the foundation of how to act on film. As my great friend who's here today, Matt Casella, said, he summed it up perfectly: make it real. Even if you have to fake it, make it real. But it was that smile and that purr of approval that was everything that I had been missing in my life. And from that point on, it never went away. And it also meant that when you worked on that set, you were going to find like-minded travelers, and you were part of the Kaplan players. This was no place to practice democracy. He was living proof that great film required a loving, benevolent tyrant. The motto was, bullshit exists, and all of us knew that it was our job to get rid of the bullshit. But really, that was a wonderful cover for the biggest-hearted best friend a person could have. As you all know, he was really just a full-on mushburger. I was lucky enough to witness him fall in love twice. Julie, and then his most precious miracle, Molly. No one has loved a daughter as ferociously as Jonathan. Did I tell you? Molly's a doctor. Right? He was so, and is so proud. So what I know is that 4 years ago, I walked into the right office. And Dr. Kaplan, where are you? There you are. We're all here today because we fucking love him. Thank you.
We get this in the light? Okay. Hello, I'm Alan Arkish. Jonathan and I met in the fall of 1967. So we shared the late 60s in the East Village. All right. NYU, the Fillmore East, and quite a few of you in the room. Okay. Quite a few in the room were there at the time. In 1973, Jonathan was the first of us to come out to California, and he urged me to throw everything aside and join him here with John Davison and work for Roger Corman. That happened, and at that point, I lived on a foam mattress in the garage of his house in Sherman Oaks. Okay, but there were a lot of us there, and most nights we shared a meal together, group meals that each of us cooked for the other. And it was there that I learned how showing your affection for your friends could be expressed through cooking and sharing a meal. Since then, Jonathan and I and Joanne, my wife, have had decades of meals together, usually ending with a stack of DVDs on the table when we go watch a movie. But the really special ones were when we had Molly and Allison and Jackie to sit down together to watch an old movie, okay? And sharing our passion and our inspiration with them. Okay. Which jump cut to today, okay. Uh, when John Davison asked me to help put together this film, it was a way for us to make a meal, okay, with Jonathan for all of you. All right. The ingredients are all his life, your photos, and his movies to be shared with all the love of a holiday meal. Thanksgiving from him to you. Going over his lifetime of work, and I watched everything. I felt like, I really felt like he was looking over my shoulder. And sometimes late at night, I actually spoke to him. You know, I'd look at a shot from Heart Like a Wheel, and you'll see it, this boom shot. I go, really great idea. Yeah. And these characters and so forth really came to life. And the other chef was John Davison, who we started in film school together. And it was Jonathan again brought us together to go over his life. And we had two sous chefs, I have to give them credit, because they were terrific, John T. Woods and Abraham Chen. Now, let's be real. Jonathan was an unblinking artist, a humanist, always seeking emotional truth. That said, this reel reflects his intensity. There are clips from his action pictures. And somebody please explain to me how the son of two socialists on the Upper West Side became the Jewish Sam Peckinpah. All right? Because that guy could direct action, and you'll see it here. Now, a half hour in, so check your watches. We start to get to the edginess of Heart Like a Wheel, the sexual assault that drives the accused, and a masterful ER, which is a whole other thing on the big screen. Feel free, if it gets to you, to step out in the lobby. That's just some kind of a little bit of a warning of how intense his film work was. So, here is a feast of our beloved Jonathan's life on film.
Everybody's emotions is right there on their sleeve. Um, Jonathan Kaplan, I loved him. Uh, how we met? My cousin was a secretary for Columbia Pictures, and I had just come out from New York. I had no film credits, nothing at all. And my cousin, a little overbearing, it goes with the family. And she said, I got your meeting with this director. It's a pretty big budget film, and you're going to meet with him. I said, well, where's the script? She said, meet with him. Okay. So I meet Jonathan Kaplan, and I sit down. We talk for 25 minutes, half hour. And, he seemed like a great guy. I couldn't tell him about the films I'd done. So I left, shook his hand. 2 days later, my cousin calls me, said, who's your agent? I said, I don't have one out here. She said, well, you got the movie. I said, I got the movie. She said, yeah, and it's on location. I said, location? Wow, Northern California? I said, Hollywood ain't too bad. And then we learned. But that first film, it was called Mr. Billion. And Jonathan was like, he was gung-ho. And he always did his homework. So the lead was Jackie Gleason, the great one. And I'm here to tell you, as bombastic he is on screen, it's worse in person. I mean, Jackie Gleason was a handful. We were filming in San Francisco in a warehouse in a railroad car and the dining car. And I was one of the bad guys, and we're at the back. We didn't have much to do. And Jonathan, he cast Chill Wills and Slim Pickens. These are icons in their own right. So Gleason, Jonathan was smart. He knew how to do Jackie, and he had the first AD, Peter Bogart, doing Ed Norton, whoa, whoa, right? They make Gleason feel a little at home. But in the other lead was Terence Hill. I thought Terence Stamp? No, Terence Hill was an Italian. His name was Mario Girotti. And he was a big star in all the spaghetti westerns. And so, he wanted to make it into the Hollywood market. He actually also did The Leopard with Burt Lancaster, Visconti. And so Jonathan said, he doesn't speak great English, but, I want to make him feel at home. So Jonathan put the word out. Who in crew, speaks Italian? And there was an old prop master named Mimo. And Jonathan met him, and he was a gentleman, older gentleman, worked with Bogart, worked with Cagney, and he retired, but he came back for this. And they started to have a nice simpatico, he and Terence Hill. On this day filming, it is Gleason in the car, and Jonathan suggested, maybe you're making a drink. Yeah, Gleason twist his head to have a drink? Yeah. So what he did, he had the little clam cocktail things that was in cans then, and you had to turn and then peel. Yeah, it was tricky. So before the scene started, the old man Mimo came. He said, "Mr. Gleason, what I do? I make a little hole. He make. Hey, Pop." He says, "Pop, I open 10 of these a day." He goes, okay. He goes off. Action. And the scene starts, and Gleason's jumping, and it's, cut. Okay, well, let's do it again, Jackie. Okay. 4 more takes. The old man comes. And he says, I make a little, and Gleason said, no, come on, Pop. Now Gleason's like red face. He's embarrassed. And boom, boom. By the 9th take, Jonathan, his cut was good. I mean, excuse me, he was in that space. And then Gleason finally said, all right, Pop, do what you got to do. And off stage, you hear, fuck you. And it was dead silence. And then all of a sudden, Gleason went, ah! That's what he wanted. That's the way you did with Mr. Jackie Gleason. But that was my maiden effort. And Jonathan saw something in me, and we worked together quite a bit. Just facts on Jonathan. I don't know if many of you people know that he would get very stressed out at Christmas time, especially as he got older. He couldn't go to a restaurant or a clothing store with the beard. Santa, Santa, and, underneath, Jonathan, you little, And he loved baseball. I love baseball. He had season tickets for the Dodgers. I love the Dodgers, especially now. Everybody loves the Dodgers. And he, we would sit there for 9 innings. And the funny thing was, we didn't talk baseball. We just didn't. We talked about life. And I treasure those times. Yeah. If you wanted to make those blue eyes glisten, all you had to say was Molly. Bingo. You all love him. I love him. And what can I say?
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm going to go back in time a bit here. In John Ford's film The Sun Shines Bright, a post-Civil War drama, a film that Jonathan absolutely hated. He couldn't stand it, actually, because of Ford's paternalistic, racist depiction of Southern black people in the film, and also because of the outsized part of a actor known as Stepin Fetchit. The old Confederate general, years after the war, turns to the hero of the film, Judge Priest, who had been, as a boy, a bugler in his Confederate regiment. And he looks with affection at Judge Priest, this general, and he says, "Little Billy Priest, you loom large in my memoirs." And I think that is something that we all can feel applied to Jonathan. Jonathan just loomed large in our lives, and still does. The Kaplans were part of the blacklist diaspora from Los Angeles to New York City. And if Los Angeles at the end of the 40s was not exactly an ancestral homeland, it was still the place that many of them thought would be where they thought they'd be playing out their successful careers in the movie business before the blacklist pulled the rug out from under them. And while the Kaplans and the rest of the blacklisted people who moved to New York scrambled for work, worked under assumed names, worked for very low pay, the kids, Jonathan and the other red diaper babies, we had New York, and we had the Upper West Side, and we had the run of the city, which a kid in those days, even at 8, 9, or 10, you could go around in that city by yourself, do pretty much whatever you wanted. You couldn't do it now. But in those days, we had that, and we had a community of friends, often in very nice apartments on the Upper West Side. And as to the apartments, I think of our apartments, the Hunters' apartments, as being sort of daylit, spacious, often empty because I was an only child. There weren't that many of us. I think of the Lardner's apartment, smaller, kind of formal as the Lardners were, always a kind of a edge of something that had to be done right. I think of the Mostel's apartment in New York, grand, but always dark. They kept the lights off in that apartment. I always remember walking into that apartment, into the sort of going from the daylight to shadow. But the Kaplan's apartment on West End Avenue, where Nora told me in '61 they moved to a fairly spacious but relatively small, classic 3-bedroom apartment on West End Avenue. And I think of that apartment as being filled with just a kind of a warm yellow light. And it was warm and crowded and noisy and full of life and full of music. The 3 kids were crammed into a couple of bedrooms. The piano took up most of the living room. Grandma was installed in the little tiny maid's room off the kitchen. I'm sure there were dogs. And the place was jumping. Solly Kaplan was irascible, funny, volatile, had a hell of a temper. Fra was ostensibly the more stable, reasonable one. She had the part in the soap opera, so she was bringing in a steadier paycheck. But she was an actress, and she was no shrinking violet either. Everybody's parents drank too much. The Kaplans were smart and a little more volatile than the rest of us. They were exuberant and affectionate. We called them the kissing Kaplans for a while. They were memorable parents. And so, kids, you have to be on your toes growing up in a family like that in that apartment, and they certainly were. Matey was a born New Yorker. I always thought of Matey as a sort of a pint-sized Walter Matthau. Nora, lovely, lovely Nora, kept her head down, and I suspect is still keeping her head down. Jonathan, from the word go, the young prince, the star, so smart. He'd even been on Broadway, as a kid actor in the William Inge's Dark at the Top of the Stairs. So the world that Jonathan grew up in was a world of politics, friends, theater, music, film. What do I want to say here? It was a much livelier community, a much richer world than they would have had if the blacklist hadn't happened and they had stayed in LA. Even if some of our parents might have been more successful ultimately, even if it was tough for the parents coming to New York and trying to reinvent their careers, I've always maintained that it was great for the kids. Great for the red diaper babies, because it was such a great world. So for a kid like Jonathan, so quick, so funny, always ready to seize life, make the most of it, going to a progressive school like Walden instead of what might have been a public school in Santa Monica or Hollywood, closer to the theater world than any of us. It was a time and a place where a kid could grow up with a passion for living that might have eluded him in Los Angeles. And so, with Jonathan's larger-than-life personality, can't see a fucking thing here, even as a kid, take advantage of it, and the left-wing politics added fire to all of it. Campaigning for Adlai Stevenson, picketing Woolworths. That community of friends who'd stood up to HUAC, stood up for what it really means to be an American in a world that suddenly became divided up between us, stuck up, and the stool pigeons in Hollywood who had named names, many of them very close friends who stopped, who just ceased becoming friends. So the thing about that community that Jonathan grew up in is that they stood up for principle and they all helped each other. They all loved each other. I remember coming home from school quite frequently, and there would be Solly pacing around the room with my father, and they would be trying to cook up some project, working on some project. And it was very often some project for Zero Mostel, who was a Broadway star and could get stuff made ostensibly. And they were working together. And this is what I remember about those guys. They read each other's scripts and they worked on each other's projects and they gave each other support. And that was the world that Jonathan Kaplan grew up in. And it's how we all learned how to collaborate with other people in the film business, which is so much the secret of the film business. And Jonathan, of course, was wonderful to work with, but was obviously just a born leader. He was our star. So the one thing I'd say about what Jonathan became, figuring that all of you are going to have stories about working with him and being his friend when he started his filmmaking career, is that for a liberal red diaper baby growing up amid the blacklist and the theater community in New York and going to a progressive school, this is a fairly rarefied, if not exactly elite, background. In his best films, he became a poet of the Western working class and disenfranchised people. He was as comfortable making blaxploitation pictures and redneck trucker pictures as he was in much more serious films about underrepresented classes, women, disenfranchised teens. And it was all because he had such a big fucking heart. And he advocated for his characters in the same way that he advocated for all of you, his friends, who loved him and followed him. And I certainly loved him. You all loved him. And we knew that we could count on him. And I knew it from the age of 10 when we became friends. And that's what the blacklist taught us, by our parents' example, to stick to your principles and support your friends. That was the bedrock. Jonathan, who came out of that, had such an enormous wit and talent and capacity for life. And there I leave it to you to fill in what you know and feel about our great friend, our fearless leader, who we all wish were here laughing with us, complaining about the wretched state of America, the orange menace, complaining about the wretched state of show business. And since he's not, we'll never forget him, and he looms large for all of us. Nora and Molly, you please correct any inaccuracies here. I will refer again to a film of John Ford's that Jonathan did love, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, in which somebody famously said, when the fact becomes a legend, print the legend. I wish Jonathan were alive, but he's left us with a very nice legend. Very nice legend indeed.
see what he means by not being able to read this. I'm Michael Pressman, and I'll take you back in time to the summer of 1965. Jonathan was 17, and he was already a force to be reckoned with. I was 15, and we were already dreaming about movies and playing with cameras. I'm going to show you a 1-minute clip from a very primitive 8mm movie that we all made, and Jonathan was already challenging an early Jackie Gleason and careening around like there was no tomorrow. He set it all up. He told me what to do. I followed direction. Let's run the clip. We were all, at the time, Running, Jumping, Standing Still, a short film from England made by Peter Sellers and Richard Lester, was our influence. I sent him this little movie about 7 years ago, and he wrote back, "Were we really once that young? Thank you so much. This is by far the best and totally unexpected gift. See you on your next westward visit." In 1974, Jonathan had already directed 2 feature films for Roger Corman. I had graduated film school in LA and was floundering. Jonathan left me a message on my answering machine. "Michael, Jonathan, call John Davison at New World Pictures. He'll get you to Roger Corman. You have to direct one of his movies." Click. I did exactly what he told me. And I got assigned to a movie to direct for Roger Corman, a nurse's movie. I waited, and then someone called me and said the movie was canceled. I called Jonathan. I got his answering machine. What do I do? He called back and left another message. "Michael, Jonathan, go back. Go back. Pitch something else. Don't give up. You must direct a movie." Click. Jonathan was right. I did direct my first film for New World Pictures, and then I got a studio job directing a sequel to The Bad News Bears. I called Jonathan in a panic. What do I do? "Michael, Jonathan, hire Fred Kronenkamp. He just shot White Line Fever. For me, you need a cameraman who will have your back and keep you on schedule. He will save your ass." I did what he told. A few years later, I directed a movie about summer stock called Those Lips, Those Eyes. It was a sweet movie. We got some terrible reviews, and it bombed at the box office. I was at an all-time low at the age of 30. Jonathan called me. "Michael, I'm getting into a cab in Houston, Texas, and the driver says, 'What do you do?' He says, 'I'm a movie director.' And the guy says, 'Well, I just saw a movie I loved. Them's lips, them's eyes. Whatever happened to that movie?'
It didn't help. I was still depressed. Then 3 months later, I got another call. Michael, I'm getting in a cab in New York, and the driver says, "What do you do, buddy?" And he goes, "I'm a movie director." He says, "Did you ever see this movie, Those Lips, Those Eyes? Now that's a great movie." Now I was laughing. Jonathan got me out of my funk. He was my mentor, in a sense. We both grew up in New York City. We went to the same school, Walden. Our families were close. Our fathers were both political and badly blacklisted during the McCarthy period. Saul Kaplan, Jonathan's father, was a brilliant composer. And though his career was short-lived, he was hired by many of the lefties of the day. He wrote a beautiful score for Spy Who Came in from the Cold, directed by Martin Ritt, The Victors, directed by Carl Foreman, and the wonderful Salt of the Earth, made in 1954 at the height of the blacklist. It was secretly filmed in Mexico, directed by one of the original Hollywood 10, Herbert Biberman. Jonathan organized a screening of Salt of the Earth at the DGA in the 1980s, and the score that Saul wrote was gorgeous. And then Jonathan, true to his love of his father, hired him to write the score of his own movie, Over the Edge. And how wonderful was that? I've saved my emails from Jonathan over the last decade, and this one is relevant. Our parents really were from the great generation. As wacko as they sometimes acted, they lived the most amazing lives over the most incredible periods of history. The Depression, World War II, the Blacklist, the Civil Rights Struggle, the anti-war movement, Watergate, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union. I will be forever grateful for being brought up to pursue a personal point of view through storytelling, whether at the dinner table or directing a show. Among many other things we share, I'm sending you all my love and big hugs. Your other brother, Jonathan. I once wrote him an email about a dream I had that we were both directing a TV episode, and he wrote back, "I've had the same dreams. Molly says I direct in my sleep. I yell action and cut, damn it." Now, how many directors yell cut, damn it, in their sleep? Jonathan Kaplan. And Jonathan's love for Molly was boundless. He wrote to me, and I quote, "Molly indeed makes my life totally worth it. Yes, I'm extremely proud of her and so touched by you saying that she and I share the same laugh. See you, I hope, soon." See you soon, Jonathan.
Let me see if I can see this. Flashlight, Molly? Do you have one on your phone? Because I can't see it really.
I'm raising you, Tony.
Oh. Whomever be here first, most appreciated.
Does she need two?
I don't know.
Oh, there's the hold. Oh, good.
I'm just gonna look.
Thank you, honey. Thank you. It looks like love. That was Jonathan Mady and my favorite line from the first and final episodes of The Closer. A beautifully choreographed script.
Pardon me.
That's okay.
I'm gonna make this so everybody can hear you.
Okay.
There
A
we go.
beautifully choreographed script of intelligence, poignancy, tickling wit, friendship, family, which also describes my brother's beautiful essence, his heart and soul. This room looks like love. From all the spot-on tributes, the emails, the calls, the texts, a theme emerged. Jonathan helped me. He guided so many through his exceptional knowledge and love of film, art, music, politics, history, decency. I was so touched by the generational range the friends, their children, their grandchildren, all touched by Jonathan's tenderness, his brilliance. Jonathan was my big brother. Soon after I was born, a hospital visit was needed, so Jonathan, age 2, joyfully proclaimed, "Oh, good. We take baby Noah back to the hospital and we never see her again." Well, when that didn't work, he came up with a new tactic. He took my hand and guided me through life. Jonathan brought me up. We grew up to discovering each new stage together, protecting each other at each step. It's piercingly painful to grasp the ungraspable. Jonathan, not here, is the deepest, most profound loss. There is and will always be a part of him in all of us, though. Our memories, our humanity, our hearts. Daniel, how safe Jonathan felt in your beautiful care. Zoila, Jonathan said you saved his life. You are astonishing. Vanna, cousin Vanna, you were his big sister. Hannah and Eliza, your Uncle Bubber adored you. Your intelligence, your humor, your deep compassion for social justice. Molly, you were his heart. He praised you, he delighted in you. Every time he spoke of you, looked at you, held you, it looked like love. Because it was and will always be the purest, deepest love. My tender big brother has traveled. Magical Thinking wishes he and our sister Mady are together, sharing wits and wisdom. My tender big brother has traveled, but he will always be part of us. My tender big brother, I cherish you. Okay.
Oh, hi everyone. I just couldn't quite bring myself to prepare. How do you sum up, a life? But like Nora so graciously did. I know my dad would want me to acknowledge you all, and especially the home crew, so to speak, and he's done so much for us, and it took a village to care for him, and I'm just so grateful to everyone who spent so much time with him, and I just have to acknowledge our beautiful family, and everyone really, out of complete love. There's no other, of course, there's no question, but I just know he would want me to tell you all how much he loves you, and to thank everyone from the bottom of his heart and my heart for this incredible event, and Paul and Tony and John Davison and Alan and John Woods and Abraham and anyone else I'm forgetting who helped put this on. This is just mind-blowing and perfect and so special. And then the home team, Zoila, Daniel, and the family who we've just been in there, being blessed by the privilege of getting to just being day to day with him. But everyone who came to the house, and Tim and Danny, he loved you all so much. And I'm so grateful to you. And I so look forward to continuing to celebrate him and all being in touch. I love you, Dad. And I know he's with us forever. So thank you all so much. And let's enjoy him. And he did it. So as I wrote on his little card that you'll all get, cut print, hallelujah.
So that's it, guys. We're going to gather in the atrium over there. There's some food, some drinks. Please come hang. And anybody else who might have anything to say, we'll have a mic out there and we'll share some laughs and some stories about Jonathan. Thank you all.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Great to see you, Jamie.
You too.
All right.
So,
You're more than welcome.
I just wanted to read this. I didn't want to do it in there, but if I may just read this into your camera here for Molly. My name is Jamie Anderson, Jamie.
You shot a lot of Joe's movies.
I've shot some of Joe's movies, yeah. Shot Piranha, Hollywood Boulevard, Piranha, Small Soldiers.
That's a kick-ass movie.
Is there something in between there? You know, it's funny, Joe, I got into the union as an assistant because I had shot Corbin pictures for Joe, but I went into camera local as an assistant. So Joe wanted me to shoot. Same thing with Rock and Roll High School. Joe wanted me to shoot The Howling, and then the union found out about it, and I couldn't do it. And same thing with Rock and Roll High School. I couldn't do that. And so John Horace shot The Howling, which is a perfect matchup. They did many things together. He did all the Gremlin pictures, and they were a great team for a while. And then
You went for Top Foodie Motorcycle?
yes, yeah. Now this is. I'm going to read this, and then you, if you want to ask me a couple of questions, you can. But I'm not very good at extemporaneous questions. Anyway, so. I met Jonathan in 1967 when we were going to NYU Film School. We made each other laugh, both loved movies, music, became good friends, and for a while we shared an apartment on East 13th Street where the rent was $83 a month. I had never met anyone quite like Jonathan before. I grew up in the suburbs, 30 miles up the Hudson River. He was a city boy from the Upper West Side. He knew New York and had an energy that just drew me in. He was the funniest person I'd ever met, and certainly one of the smartest. There was a lot going on in New York in the late 60s, and I'm glad I had someone like Jonathan in my life to both enjoy it and survive it. I shot Jonathan's student film called Stanley, and we found we really liked working together. As small as that film may have been, it was easy to see Jonathan was born to be a director. In the fall of '71, somebody else was remembering a different year, but anyway, Jonathan got a phone call from Roger Corman with an offer to come to Hollywood. As sometimes happens when one gets those kinds of calls, not that I ever have, he thought it was a prank and hung up. And it turned out that a filmmaker and teacher of ours, Martin Scorsese, had recommended Jonathan to direct one of the many semi-exploitation movies Roger was producing at that time. It was called Night Called Nurses and contained Roger's recipe of some action, a little comedy, a dash of politics, and just enough nudity to get an R rating. Luckily for me, Jonathan brought me out here with him along with good friends Dan Opatashu and John Davison. The four of us got a place at the Hollywood Hawaiian Hotel on Yucca Street, and thanks to Jonathan's boundless energy and natural gift for leading a movie production, we had more fun than I'd ever thought possible. That began a career for him that lasted about 40 years, and he proved over and over again how suited he was for one of the most challenging, entertaining, totally exasperating, and completely fun jobs there is. Working with Jonathan was never dull. He was born to wrangle this unruly thing that is a film crew. He was truly gifted at directing actors whom he mostly adored. There was a powerful center of gravity on the set, and Jonathan was it. Everyone was totally aware when Jonathan said quiet, action, or cut. He was very loyal to people he liked working with, using them over and over whenever the chances arose. I was certainly the beneficiary of that loyalty as well as his encouragement. Jonathan got me moved up to camera operator on Hard Like a Wheel, and then to director of photography for Unlawful Entry. Working with Jonathan accounted for so many of the best times I had making movies. He had an incredible eye, knew just where to put the camera, and had a way of energizing everyone around him. He was also just a wonderful man. Smart, complicated, affectionate, maddening at times, very entertaining, and just so much damn fun. I moved back east some years ago, and I will always regret not keeping more connected with him recently, though when we did speak, it was always a joy. He was something else, and I shall miss him. Thank you.
That's wonderful.
So, yeah, he was great to work with. And obviously, you know, so many people have said so many wonderful things, and they're all so true. I never cried so much in a 2-hour period as I have today. Really an amazing.
Did you get to see him somewhat before?
When he was ill?
Yeah.
I hadn't seen him in years, no.
Oh.
The last time I was out here was a year ago, and he wasn't comfortable seeing people at the moment that I happened to be. I was just a short visit, and yeah, so it was mostly phone contact.
What was the picture you mentioned that he brought you on? He bumped you up as an operator?
Heart Like a Wheel.
Heart Like a Wheel. That's the one.
That was with Tak Fujimoto.
Shot.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like? I mean, you just got thrust in there, and then he really looked out after his friends.
He did. He had tremendous. He was so encouraging and just tremendous faith in people, huh?
I mean, because I don't want the sound.
Oh yeah, tremendous faith in people. But I mean, I knew how to write. I knew how to operate by then. I'd shot 4 movies. One with Michael Pressman, the Corman stuff, and those movies you do your own operating. Yeah. And I was just a natural born operator. It was the greatest job in the world. I just loved it. So when I started that picture, it was just I felt very at home. So that was a great job. Probably the best job on a set in those days, anyway. I don't know about it anymore, but it's a lot of fun. And but being DP is also a lot of fun, and that I was a little less sure of, but when he did it, when he moved me up, I had gotten to. I actually got technically moved up on a picture I was doing called Dick Tracy with Storaro, and they moved me up to DP to shoot the second unit, and then right after that I did Unlawful Entry, which is a good little movie and fun to shoot and fun to light, and he was great. Jonathan was great.
What did you learn from Jonathan working with him in that capacity? You know, that you're cinematographer for him.
Well, he had a great eye and was great at staging. The staging thing is so tricky, and many directors have no clue really how to do that. And he was very good at it. Always had an idea of how he wanted to approach a scene, and it was really helpful for me to watch him do that because it helps my work too. And yeah, he just was very comfortable creating a scene, taking the written word and turning it into images and action and movement and character, and it was fun to watch.
How much did his, if any, did his the movies change from when you received the script to by the time Kaplan screened it for you? You know, obviously it's an evolution.
Maybe by the time it was done?
Yeah, by the time it's done. I mean, was there anything that was surprising that you really felt that it was Jonathan's touch, the adaptation?
You know, I know that there was, but my ability to recall these kinds of details is really challenging for me. But yeah, there often was. I didn't always have a clear idea of how things were done, but we did a lot of prep. We walked a lot of sets and locations and stuff. So when we went on the set to shoot something, we had already been working out of in our minds for quite a while. So, because he was very thorough about being prepared with stuff, which is also a great thing to learn.
You guys were the most equipped Roger Corman school.
Yeah, I mean, it really was fabulous. It doesn't exist anymore, really. It does in some other ways, but.
Was it true that he printed? Corman would have dailies printed in black and white because he was.
Sometimes, yeah. In those days, it was actually saving money. It got to the point where that didn't matter.
Okay.
But in those days, you could still save a few dollars.
I'm sure that.
Printed dailies and black ones. Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to remember if any of ours did, but I saw it happen.
Piranha didn't.
I don't think it was true on Piranha, but it might have been true on Hollywood Boulevard. I'd have to ask Joe. I don't remember that. But I know he definitely did it on some. He was, I mean, he was an amazing guy. When one's first reaction to Roger is to be infuriated by the penny pinching and stuff. But, you know, he knew what he was doing. What did he make, 1,000 movies? And you could count the ones that lost money on one hand. So he was smart. He was smart.
So basically, in a Corman movie, you're also more or less lighting it yourself, or is that?
Well, you have a lighting crew, but yeah.
But small.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
You know, I didn't. Well, you're not necessarily doing any of the physical work, but you had a crew that was a little too small, and they were learning too. Some of them, many of those people are still my best friends. You know, it was like being in the army, I suppose, or any sort of thing in your youth where you're thrown together in sort of dire circumstances and struggling, and those people become friends for life. Some of them, and they still are. It's great, and as was Jonathan. So I'll miss him. Thank you. Appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate you.
Hi, I'm Joe Dante. I met Jonathan in his New York period when he was among the first persons of that group to come out to Hollywood. But when I came out to Hollywood, one of the first people I ran into was Jonathan, and he was doing a song session for some songs that were in Student Teachers, which he was doing for Corman. And he was having a little trouble with these singers. And he came out of the booth to say hello to me, and he said, "I'll tell you one thing about Hollywood. Egos, egos, egos." And I remember thinking, that's an interesting first impression of Hollywood. And of course, he was totally right. One of the amazing things about Jonathan was that not only was he one of the most talented of the group of people who came through Corman, but he was also able to maneuver the studio system. And I think part of that had to do with his working for Roger, because you really learned a lot of stuff when you were working for Roger about how to be diplomatic and how to manipulate things. And for Jonathan to have the career that he did, starting in the same trenches that the rest of us did, was a sheer stick-to-itiveness and complete talent. On my first movie, he was very helpful because it was a very, very low-budget movie that Alan and I directed together, and it was really cheap. And we were out shooting in Tapia Park, and I was shooting a group scene, and I shot the thing, and Jonathan was in the movie. One thing that Alan and I did that was smart was we had Paul Bartel and Jonathan in the movie as characters, so they could be on the set to tell us what we were doing wrong. And I remember in this first group shot that I had done, I said, "Oh, good, now, okay, we'll move on." He said, No, don't move on, get a close-up. Because obviously, if I didn't get a close-up, I wasn't going to be able to shorten the scene. And so it was all the kind of stuff that you pick up, but it was so much easier with somebody on the set who actually knew what they were doing. And Jonathan, of course, he played an inept prop master. And he played it, I must say, brilliantly. He doesn't really have a lot to say in the movie, but he's very physical in it. And this was back in the slimmed-down Jonathan days. That movie turned out to be very successful for Corman, and allowed Alan and I to have a career, all of which we did in the shadow of Jonathan, because he was one of the very first people who came from our group who had become successful. And one of the things that people misremember about Jonathan is how much he was influenced by Harry Hurwitz, who was one of his teachers at NYU, and who also was a film director and made a number of low-budget films, including The Projectionist and The Comeback Trail and some other things. But Harry had a great sense of humor, and he on the sly he made a pseudo porno movie called These Raging Loins, which Jonathan used to love to talk about and to say those words over and over, which he does several times in Hollywood Boulevard. Also, Jonathan was introduced to a guy named Robert Statz, who was a pitchman kind of character, who was first seen in The Projectionist. And then Jonathan ported him over, and he brought him out to Night Call Nurses, and he brought him out and put him in Mr. Billion, which I have a scene with him in, which thankfully was cut. But there was just this New York smart aleck kind of witty veneer that came with Harry, and Jonathan sort of picked it up, and it's very evident in his earlier pictures. And in addition to being a friend and a mentor, Jonathan was just a great guy to be around. He was so funny. He's a total movie buff, very strong likes and hates, and a great person to argue with. But he was always there for you. And I think one of the things that people remember most about Jonathan is how much heart he had and how warm he was. And even though I had seen him on the set being, pretty tyrannical with the extras, it was always came from a need to get the picture better and to make everybody happy. And as was seen today in the tributes that were done to him, he was really a one-of-a-kind person who, I don't know if he had the career quite that he wanted, but he did some great work. And when he finally got into television, his years in ER are among the best television that's ever been done. And I think he was proud of that. It's a career to be cherished, and I certainly wish that I hope that someday my career will measure up to his legacy. Anyway, that's my story.
Question. Do you remember any instances of Roger giving Jonathan notes on any of his, progress cuts or anything?
Well, Roger gave everybody notes, which was a great introduction to the world of making movies, where no matter what you do, people have notes. Usually, people who don't know what they're talking about. Now, Roger always knew what he was talking about, so the notes were better than, as you discovered when you went on, better than the notes you were going to get from other people. And he was very good about trying to make things shorter. Roger had a thing where if you could keep the movie to 80 minutes, he only had to put it in 2 cans, which saved him money. And he and Jonathan were very copacetic. I mean, they got along great. And as most people who worked for Roger felt like, oh my God, it's like they're having a tiff with their father. They're having issues. But in the end, everybody who went through that school ended up going back and saying great things about Roger and loving Roger. Francis Coppola, Marty Scorsese, all these people, all the people who got their starts, Bogdanovich, all were very fond of Roger in the end because A, he had given them their careers, and B, he had maybe made their Women in Prison movie a slightly worse, but it's not the end of the world. You got your movie made, and here it was opening in 27 drive-ins. So it was a positive experience all around.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Hi, Ed. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. It was so inspiring to hear so many incredible stories, and I was like, man, I don't know if I can get in front of that crowd and do this. So this is incredible, and it's just so true to Jonathan's heart to have a little film moment, little set moment here. So thank you so much for doing this.
It's our pleasure. Tell me about your first memory of Jonathan.
I was 11 or 12 years old. So the reason I know Jonathan is through his niece, Hannah. She and I went to middle school together in New York. And I was an outcast in middle school, didn't have a lot of friends except for Hannah and then one more. And she's like, and I was already into acting at this point. I started doing acting classes in 6th or 7th grade. And Hannah was like, my uncle is a director in Hollywood. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, you should come meet him. So we went to this hotel. It was like in Midtown somewhere, and it was like a fancy Midtown hotel. And I just remember like feeling starstruck and feeling like I was in the presence of somebody like major. And, you know, as Jonathan does, like he was opening up to me. He was just kind of like, oh, because Hannah was like, this is Julia. She loves acting. She's like taking acting classes. She wants to be an actress one day. And so he kind of entertained me on that. He was like, oh, really? Like, what do you like about it? And what acting classes are you taking? And I opened up to him, and he already at that point was like, I could see you doing that. Like, yeah, you've got something. And so that was my first memory of Jonathan. And shortly thereafter, Hannah and her mom, Jonathan's sister, Mady, and I came to LA and stayed at Jonathan's house when we were like 11, 12 still. And it was one of the most magical memories of my childhood, like staying in Jonathan's house. He has this ADU that some people have mentioned. It's like this really magical little studio apartment above his garage. And for an 11, 12-year-old girl, you know, to stay with your friend in your own place, not sharing walls with any parents, it was epic. And Jonathan was always kind of lingering in the back, like entertaining us and like making sure we were okay, but giving us our space to be weird and free. Another really like beautiful memory that I have of Jonathan is when he drove us to the airport, and it was nighttime, and all the windows in the car were open and the wind was blowing, and he was playing Tom Petty, and it was Don't Come Around Here No More. And it's like just this really kind of weird song, like kind of futuristic and trippy. And I was like, wow, this guy is so cool. You know, like he's just full of magic. He's just full of these moments, these like glimmers of magic and beauty.
Tell me about what Jonathan said to you that has stayed with you.
So the second or third big piece of Jonathan in my life that I will always be grateful for was when I came to LA in my 20s. I moved in with these actors and musicians from Texas, and I was living with these two guys in this house in North Hollywood, and it was a mess. It was a mess. It was just like parties and drinking and drugs like all day, every day. And eventually I was like, I can't stay here. So I posted on Facebook. Jonathan was on Facebook at this time. He hadn't abandoned it yet. I'm looking for a place around North Hollywood. You know, if anybody has any leads, let me know. And he was like, come stay with me. So I lived in that ADU, that little magical spot, for 7 years in my 20s with Jonathan and up in the main house, always kind of this like, you know, omnipresent, you know, like force in my life. And that message of, I believe in you, like you have something special. That was just always recurring for that time and any time.
He really saw something special in you.
Yeah. What I really wanted to say is Jonathan was a true artist. He loved people. Like he saw the beauty in people and in life. And that's why you couldn't stop him from being an artist, like whether he was a director or writing a screenplay or making a collage or like having a dinner. Like he just had this passion for like beauty and life. And I think he saw that in me and I saw that in him, and we always were kindred spirits that way.
It's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
You said it. Mic drop. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You got to live in the house. That's
I know.
Yeah.
It was
Isn't it crazy
epic.
From the beginning, like you're just like, wow, this director.
Yes.
And then you're in. That's crazy.
Oh my God, and the stories that I got to hear. like he had endless stories about like different people, whether it was in music or the Fillmore East or like movies. And that was one of the things that I'll miss the most about Jonathan is his stories.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Thanks, Ed.
That was great. You lived in New York for a long time?
Yeah, 24 years.
Jonathan and I met at a poker game at Tim Hunter's house on the Upper West Side of Manhattan when we were all 12 years old. At the poker game, Tim, who spoke today, but Tim's dad had a big poker game and therefore had a poker table. And we would all go to Tim's house once every couple of weeks. It was Tim, me, Jonathan, Jimmy Lardner, Josh Mostel, Tony Marzani. It was a great group who remained friends for years and years, largely through Tim Hunter's doing. He was very, very good at locating people. Obviously, this is pre-digital age, so there was no emails, there was no way to get in contact, nobody had a cell phone, there were no cell phones. It was very, very hard to keep track of people, and somehow Tim managed to do that. And when I moved out here originally to go to medical school in '69, and Tim moved out here, and Jonathan stayed in the East Coast to go to film school, we still managed to keep in touch, and all wound up at Roger Corman. Johnny was a wonderful poker player because you could never read his face. It always looked so gleeful and alive, and then he'd kill you with 3 aces, and you never saw it coming. But Jonathan and I remained friends through all of that time socially, and because we had common roots and had grown up together, but never really had a chance to work together. I became a writer, and then after that a writing producer, and then after that a producer, because I always saw writing as being a kind of a suicidal profession. And Jonathan and I wound up working together in the mid-'90s. Finally, there was a film I was about to make. I had a series of films to make for Showtime where a piece of art would be brought to life by the director. It was director-driven. They were all feature directors who had never done TV before. It was called Picture Windows, and Jonathan wanted to bring a Degas painting to life as a story about a ballerina and a street musician who she helps become the first violinist. And Jonathan immediately, and I didn't really know the people that he had worked with over the years that he and I had known each other, but hadn't worked together, and immediately insisted on all sorts of people because he was an incredibly loyal friend. And when he found people whose talent he cherished and admired, he never wanted to let go of them, and he wanted to make sure that you knew about them. And one of the people he brought to me was this wonderful composer, Hummy Man. And when he mentioned him to me, he said, "You're going to want him to do everything for you for the rest of your life. He's that good." And obviously, he's here, so I'm saying nice things about him. If he weren't here, I would say other things. But the truth of the matter is, Hummy and I wound up working together many times after that with many different directors. But during that period, Jonathan, the dedicated director that he was, would hide from me on set. So as the producer, I was trying very hard to get this series of very ambitious films done for like no money, with minor training from Roger Corman and AFI. And I got a call from the line producer one night saying, "You know, your friend is now shooting his 14th hour. I think it would be great if you came here and said something." So when he found out that I'd come to the set, he made sure that I would never find him on the set. And I'd be hearing action called from behind drapes and under beds and in a closet and wherever he could find where I wouldn't be to stop him. And he made a beautiful film. And it was worth every dime, and it didn't go over budget for whatever reason. I don't know what kind of magic he works, but he had the same kind of training. And then a few years later, he was at our house, and we were having a little Christmas gathering. And my son, who was a teenager, who had dyed both of his sides of his head different colors and had a mouth full of braces, was very obnoxious to Jonathan, mostly out of respect and admiration, and was trying to get his attention. And Nick came over to Jonathan. We were sitting on the couch, and Jonathan said, "Uh-oh, here comes Beavis and Butthead." And my son reminded me of that, which is why I'm bringing it up today. He was saddened by Jonathan's passing. He was one of his heroes when he was a kid. Then he got a job that nobody else really had at the time. He called me up one day and he said, "Look, you work in TV. What is a directing producer?" And I said, "I don't know. I've never heard of a directing producer. We've never met one, never had one before." I knew that they had somebody on Hill Street Blues and on another show that was also a producer on the show, but he also directed each of those cases. They directed quite a few, but that wasn't their job per se. So I said, "I don't know. I guess it's for continuity. I guess because the actors trust you and they're asking for you to be on the show, that it's to make sure that because TV is such a transient medium, that they have somebody who'd be there to maintain a certain consistent quality and tone, and also to be able to rely on if an actor has a performance issue because they know you better." And he thought that was a good explanation. I was winging it because I had no idea, but it made logical sense to me. And he called me a couple of weeks later. He said, "Well, it's not exactly what the job is." I said, "Well, what is the job?" He said, "Well, I kind of sit next to the director, and I order craft service." And I said, and as time went by, that's certainly not the job that he had on ER, nor on any other show that he had after that. Jonathan, who had a very, very distinct sense of taste, sense of drama, sense of performance, also had great respect for other directors. And so he found a very effective and very appreciated way of working with other directors without threatening them or jeopardizing them, but rather as assisting them, as nurturing them, as supporting them, and really carved out a job in the television business that didn't really exist before. And in a lot of ways, all of the people who are now doing the job, really, I wish they could have seen what he did, because nobody quite finds the same way to go as he did. I found a letter from him that he wrote to me before I was about to work with Peter Bogdanovich for the first time back in the mid-90s on a picture called Picture. It was one of the same things that Jonathan did, Picture Windows, and Jonathan was trying to warn me not to hire Peter because Peter had come from. He was running with a very bad reputation at the time. People thought he was obnoxious and arrogant. I found he wasn't, but I didn't know him at the time. And Jonathan was trying to warn me and sent me this beautiful, warm letter along with an article about Texasville and how things had gone completely south with Peter on it. And it was really funny. I've been cleaning out my file cabinets and found this letter in July. And I was going to go over to Johnny's house. I knew I knew the shape that he was in was not great at that point. And Tim Hunter was going to go over with me because Tim had been going on a regular basis, but he had gone out of the country and said, "As soon as I get back, we'll go together. You can show Jonathan the letter, and he really wants to see you." And unfortunately, and maybe he'll watch this at some point, but by the time Tim came back, it was too late, and I never got to show him the letter, and tell him, how incredibly thoughtful he was in so many different ways, and how suddenly memories came back that I hadn't experienced in years and years and years. We knew each other 60 years, maybe longer. I don't know many people. I don't have many friends in my life. I've kept it very small. And he was always one of them, and he'll be greatly missed.
I want to take you back. Tell me about Jonathan, the 12-year-old. Tell me about who he looked up to and what was important to him.
You know, a lot of what, and I'll reference what Tim said, but it's true. There was a group of kids. I was not one of them. I mean, I was part of their friendship, but I was not from a blacklisted parents' background. My parents were not in the entertainment industry. They were poor. My father was an artist and became a women's clothing designer. My mother was a social worker. But I knew these kids from the neighborhood, and we all became friends. I'd gone to school with Jimmy Lardner and with Tim Hunter, and so as a result, I adopted all of these friends, and I met them. Johnny, I remember Jonathan as being the biggest personality in the group. Jonathan was big in his laughter, he was big in his jokes, and he was big in his sense of right and wrong. I'm sure that coming from the parents that they all came from, they were all raised with a real sense of ethics and fairness and political. It's the wrong expression, but it's what we're used these days. But political correctness was different then than it is now. A sense of justice, I think, is what it was. They all came from families who were forced into either hiding or trying to do what they did best and what they loved and what they had passions for in a secretive way. But they made sure that they raised children who had a sense of values that corresponded to their own to some degree, but also gave them the space to grow from there to somewhere else if they chose. Jonathan to me was the most fun to be with at a poker table. He would make jokes, he would say things, he would talk incessantly sometimes, which was great. He was just fun. Some of the other kids were much too serious. Tim and I wound up being very close, and we became writing partners, and we went on from there. And it was through Tim that I was able to keep in contact with Jonathan. But Jonathan was the entertainment, and I don't know how else to say it. I oddly enough was surprised because I never knew exactly how old he was. I was the youngest in the group, but I actually thought he was. And I thought he was because he was so vivacious and so, he wasn't concerned about how he behaved, which is, I think, what it was. It was childish in a way, but at the same time, it was delightful and inspiring, inspirational. And I think that's part of what made him a wonderful director, that he could bring energy with him. He brought energy wherever he went. And that energy was always good energy, even when he was angry. So.
I love that. Thank you. It's like the poker table is the perfect metaphor for him making films. You know, three aces at the end.
Yeah. He kept. It was like a magician that way, and it would be, look over here, while all of a sudden, this hand came out. But it was, it was a wonderful way for us to pretend to be adults and at the same time, learn about each other and enjoy each other's company, because we didn't really get to spend days together. We were all in different schools for the most part, and this was a way to. It's different than the parties that other kids had and play dates that other kids had. Anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaplan, turn off your follow spot and go home. That was Arthur Shafransky. He was Arthur Max today, and he was the lighting director at the Fillmore. And we got where there was a lot of talent at the Fillmore, including Jonathan. It was right next door to NYU Film School. So Martin Scorsese was editing Woodstock in the basement. We had Jonathan, we had Joe Dante, Jonathan Kaplan, John Davison, Alan Arkish, Jamie Anderson were all filtering out of the Fillmore. But we all took great delight in watching Jonathan get fired. So he got fired often, but they'd hire him back the next day because everybody loved him, and he was very smart. And it's just he getting Bill's face about the food or something, Bill Graham, and he got himself fired. Get out of my theater, But the next day he was back, so it was great. The Fillmore was right next to NYU Film School. It was a couple blocks from Tin Pan Alley. It's kind of more blocks away from Broadway. There's a lot of talent there. And in any other rock and roll theater, you'd find a local carpenter working on the stage. At the Fillmore, you'd find PhD students and Jonathan Kaplan and people like that. There was a lot of intelligence there, although it was all analog. And Cecily from the Light Show dated somebody from Boston who was digital. So I said, it's the digital asteroid in Boston coming down to wipe out the analog dinosaur that we were. So, but then I went on the road. I went up to London to work at the Rainbow Theatre. Then I worked for the Grateful Dead. Then I worked for Commander Cody. And when I come through town, through L.A., I get Alan and the guys in the concerts for free because they were working for Roger Corman and couldn't afford. So they kept saying, you got to come to L.A. and make movies. So the Grateful Dead took a hiatus. I drove the bus and did lighting for Commander Cody for a year. And then just said, I'm going to L.A. And he came down here. And Terry Schwartz, I don't know if you know her, she producer, and she saw me at a party. I had a knife on my belt, a buck knife, and she said, oh, you must be a grip. Show up, tomorrow morning it was Grand Theft Auto, I think. No, Eat My Dust. It was Eat My Dust. So I started on that. I'd practice with a C-stand, and I'd figure out the stuff. I'd done a lot of lighting, but just never anything for film. But and then
tell me about Jonathan when, say, like the long nights when you're going over or whatever. How was Jonathan? Do you have any memories of really?
Just a great sense of humor. He remembered the firing thing and would threaten to fire people and would do stuff, but it was all in jest. He was like, was swabbing the wounds from, his time at the Fillmore. But he learned a lot at the Fillmore. There are a lot of real smart people there. And Jonathan was just great. So I got to work with him at the Fillmore in rock and roll, and then I got to work with him on Unlawful Entry. I worked a whole bunch of films with him, starting at Corman, and then I went off. Some guy grabbed me, and I did E.T. and Ghostbusters and stuff like that. So
sounds like a good guy. Sounds like a good guy that grabbed you to do E.T. and Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah. So, but Jonathan was great. It was the way he just had a great sense of humor and could read a situation really well and tell you the truth about it. Or be able to, as all the actors have said, motivate them. He did what he had to do to get, and sometimes it wasn't pretty, I mean, he could be a character, he could be very blunt, but we all loved him.
Do you have a Kaplan impression?
No, I do Arthur better, or Bill, get out of my theater. It's just we knew he was going to be hired back again, and we all loved him, and he spoke for us. A lot of us sometimes didn't dare to talk back to Bill Graham. Jonathan would just get right back in his face. Why were you feeding us that crappy food? It was very interesting to see what he'd come up with. And he'd also challenge you. I ran the follow spot a lot of times on house left, stage right. But you had to go, you always came out on stage left. So you'd have to go, and he'd stop you and say, do you have a pass? Jonathan, you know me. I run the follow spot. So, but he's great. We loved him.
Thank you. That was really awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jennifer, whatever you want to tell.
First of all, I love Jonathan. He was a very dear friend of mine. I had the incredible opportunity not only to have him as a friend, but also he was part of my life. He was part of my son's life. And I did his hair since 1990. So we had a very special relationship. I got to know him through all his stories. He would be on a movie, he would come in, Jennifer, you got to do my hair. And he always had my back. I was a single mom, and he just was special, and he was proud of me for working hard and for raising my son on my own, and I just loved him, and my son loved him. And the first time, right when Molly was born, I went to their house to see Julie and meet Molly, and Jonathan and my son Marlon came with me. He was like 4 or 5, and Marlon was always into movies, and it was his jam. And Jonathan said, "Hey, can I make you an English muffin?" And Marlon said, "Sure." And they just hit it off, and they started talking about movies. And then Jonathan said, "I love this kid." And he really did love Marlon. And Marlon got to go to the set of ER a few times because he was a filmmaker and he loved being on set. And Jonathan just took care of him. And when my son passed away, Jonathan was there for me, and so was Julie. And he came to Marlon's memorial service. They both did, and it just meant the world to me that I had his support. And I know that they're up there laughing, cussing each other out. And he will always be part of my life, and he's made a big impact on my life. And one day he told me when I was doing hair, standing on my feet, he said, "Someday, Jennifer, you're going to write a book." And I might.
You should.
I should.
And this time you have to.
Yeah. I just, he's just a very important person. And Molly, I love her so much. And like I said, his legacy will always be here with us. And that I'm very grateful for.
This was so beyond perfect. There's nothing else that I could even ask. You said it all.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot. Jonathan was so giving,
Mm.
and you contextualized it so perfect, and
He was a great man.
he really was.
Yeah. And I got to see him before he passed, and that was a very important thing and gift to me as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much.
Hi, I'm Harry Northup, Loyal. The first time I worked for Jonathan Kaplan was in Over the Edge. He came up to me in the waiting room where I was sitting with several other actors. He kneeled down beside me and said, "I want you for this role. So you have to go in there with 4 balls, be strong, and look at the producer and show warmth to him." I had 5 scenes memorized and improv material in my head. Later, after getting the role of Sergeant Doberman, Jonathan told me, "I wanted to use you ever since I saw you in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. I thought Marty had just hired you off the street, that you were the real guy. When we were doing Bad Girls, I said, 'You gave me the best part I ever did,' meaning Sergeant Doberman, and he said, 'I know I did.' 19 years later, I sit in my room in the Philippines waiting to shoot my first scene in Broke Down Palace, a story about 2 young women from Ohio who are thrown in jail in Thailand for smuggling drugs. It was a setup. I play Leon Smith, a U.S. counsel.
This is my 9th job for Jonathan Kaplan. Last year, I played the minister in Cold Blood, CBS miniseries. We shot that in Calgary. Other acting roles with Kaplan include Project X, 11th Victim, Unlawful Entry, Reform School Girl. He also cast me in ER, MTV video, The Court. He's a great director, strong, and with an enormous range of feeling. And a couple other things. When I was doing ADR on Bad Girls, I asked Jonathan, I said, what's your best film, the best film you ever directed? And he said, Over the Edge. And I said, Over the Edge? I thought it would have been The Accused with Jodie when she won the Academy Award. And he said, no, Over the Edge. And I said, why? And he said, because it didn't even need me as a director. It had its own life. And Jonathan, you know, when I was working in the Philippines, I flew in there 18 hours. I had to work the next day. I'd gotten motion sickness, and you know, it was a miracle I was even able to do the scene that the next day. And then when I went home, right before I left the set, I walked up to him, and I said to him, I hope I didn't fuck up your movie, Jonathan. He said, no. He said, you were great. He said, I would never let you do that. And then he said, see you in January. So I came back in January and worked for him. And, you know, he was just an incredible director. I worked for 3 directors, Scorsese, Demme, and Kaplan. They hired me 29 times. And Jonathan was the one that gave me the best part. And I love Jonathan. He's underrated. And I wish somebody would do a book on him. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
Just like pouring down her face was like, what are they doing to her in there?
Harry, you can talk to me.
Okay.
Tell me about your first memory with Jonathan.
Yeah, well, I had worked for Gene Corman, Roger Corman's brother, on a picture called Cool Breeze. That was my first job as an assistant director. And I won't waste everybody's time with how I got that job, but it was a goofy situation. So shortly thereafter, I got a call from Julie Corman, who was, you know, married to Roger and was producing Night Call Nurses. And she offered me to do Night Call Nurses. And there was another director on board. And I was going to get 3 weeks prep, which was very exciting. I wasn't starting for a few weeks. And then I get a call that there were creative differences with the director, and that, you know, they've got a new director who's coming to town. And that was Jonathan. And the story I heard was that Roger Corman had, he hired Marty Scorsese for his first movie, Boxcar Bertha. And Marty used to teach at NYU, and he taught Jonathan. And so when Roger fired the other director, he called Marty and said, who's your best student? And he said, Jonathan. And then we heard today that Jonathan got the call like 1 in the morning or something like that to be on a plane and get out here to do the movie. So then I met Jonathan, you know, and, you know, he's one of those people, you just like him immediately. There's, you know, he's just got a great sense of humor, and he's just really a pleasure to be around and everything. And we had, on Cool Breeze, it was actually a 30-day shooting schedule. This one, it was 14 days. So Jonathan, you know, had only done student films, and, you know, the crew is really hardly a crew. You know, there's just a few people that are involved. And, you know, he hadn't worked on a movie set before, so we went and scouted, and he was asking me, you know, how's the day go and stuff like that. And I said, well, you know, the best thing is to make a shot list, you know, for each day. Figure out in the morning what shots you want so, you know, we can work our way through it and everybody knows what's going on. So we did that, and we're rolling along, and he was great with the actors. He was very sure of himself. And we're get down to the 13th day, and we have one more day, but it looked like we could finish in 13 days. So we did. So Julie Corman was upset that we didn't shoot the extra day. I guess she thought we should have taken more time or something, but Jonathan was really efficient. And, you know, he knew what he wanted, he knew when he had it, and we just moved on. And we became friends then, and then we worked together a few more times. And in my experience on movies, which is about 50 of them, kind of the goofiest day I ever had was with Jonathan on Mr. Billion. And I was the second AD on that. I had, long story, I won't bother you with the story, but I was the second instead of the first. The first AD was Peter Bogart. And Peter is a really great guy, and Peter grew up with Jonathan, so they were really pals. And they used to do these imitations of Jackie Gleason and Art Carney, you know, Norton and all this kind of thing. So they were all always having fun together. And so this one morning, I come out to ride out with Peter to the set, and Peter's in this heated argument with his then wife. And they're yelling at each other, and I'm standing there. I don't know what to do or where to go, and you know, and they're really getting at it. And then he yells at her. He says, "I got to go to the set." And he gets in the car, and she jumps on the car and grabs hold of the windshield wipers, and he's swerving the car to try to get her off of the car, right? And I'm watching this. I don't know what to say. And finally, they break up and everything, and they get back into it again, and I'm standing there, and Peter says, tell Jonathan I can't work today. Okay, so I tell Jonathan he can't work, so I'm going to be the assistant director, right? So, okay, so we get to the set, and it's towards the end of the filming on location, and it was a kind of a pickup day, makeshift, you know, little scenes and stuff. It wasn't much to do. And we get to this one thing, and he wanted to have a guy in a rowboat. We were shooting with the water in the background, and he saw this boat tied up, a little rowboat, and he said, I want somebody in the rowboat rowing by while this goes on. And so I grabbed the standby painter, whose son was with him, and I put them in the rowboat, and, you know, they kind of knew how to row, not very well, and we go to shoot it, and the first time they shoot it, it's just a catastrophe. It's not working at all. And Jonathan goes, "Fuck it," you know. He says, "You direct it," to me. And he walks off the set with the writer. I think there were some other things brewing in the background I didn't know about. But I went from the second AD to the director in one day. You know, it was like the goofiest thing, you know. I don't think that's ever happened to anybody before. You know? So that's my story with Jonathan. And we did 4 pictures together. The last one, they called me up. That was Heart Like a Wheel. They called me up and they wanted me to replace the assistant director on it. And I had been in a bad car accident, and I had a broken leg. And I said, "No, I can't be an assistant director. You know, you got to be on your feet all day to be an assistant director." And I just, you know, I had a cast from my hip to my foot, you know, and I was on crutches. "Well, we'll make you the associate producer. Jonathan just wants you there," you know. So I jumped into that one and got a bump in my credits. Unfortunately, it didn't make it into the movie.
What was the hardest decision you've ever seen Jonathan make on a set? It doesn't even have to be on a set.
You know, he didn't have trouble with decisions mostly, but there was one scene on Heart Like a Wheel where in the foreground he had Bonnie Bedelia being interviewed at a racetrack somewhere. And in the background, you know, kind of way back, Charlie Haid, who had the part before Beau Bridges replaced him, was supposedly sitting at a table. He was sitting at a table. He's supposed to be interviewed by somebody in the background. And Jonathan didn't care about what was going on back there. It was just background. So Charlie says, "Do I have any lines?" what am I doing back here? You know, and Jonathan's like, yeah, just improvise. And he says, well, is there a microphone? And Jonathan says, yeah, there's a microphone there. You know, and there was a mic, but it was a prop mic, right? And so Charlie picks up the prop mic and he says, there's no cable to it. And he says, just do it. It's fine. Just do it, you know. So that was about the most difficult thing. He was very prepared. He was great with actors. Obviously, he grew up, you know, in an acting family, a creative family, and everything. So, you know, it was just normal for him. You know, it's practically from the day he was born, he was, you know, into it. So, and he usually, you know, the scripts got worked out ahead of time. So, although I take it back, there was one scene, he didn't really have to make a decision about it. But there was a scene that was pretty upsetting to all of us. We had doubles on horseback. It was a double for Terrence Hill and for Valerie Perrine, right? Was she in?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were supposed to take a horse fall. And so the double on the back, the woman double, was a very good equestrian, rodeo and all that kind of thing, but she wasn't that tuned into doing a horse fall. So you actually kind of turn the horse and turn it a certain way. You kind of bring its head around, and it starts to go over, and the horse is trained to do that. But the horse never got trained to do it with two people on board. And the gal, her natural instinct was to stay on the horse, not fall off the horse. So they tried it numerous times, which later we were told by a more experienced producer, you know, after 3 times, if you're not getting it right in a stunt, you got to try something else. But none of us knew that. And the horse rolled over the stunt guy and broke his pelvis. And so, you know, it was a shocking day. It wasn't anything that Jonathan was responsible for. So, you know, we basically wrapped. It was the end of that scene anyhow, but we basically wrapped when, you know, we got him in an ambulance and got him out of there. He was laid up for a year over that. And it was a tough lesson for us all because, you know, it does make sense. If a stunt isn't working, you don't keep trying it. You know, you redesign it somehow. But we were young and green, so we didn't know.
Gotta learn somehow.
Yeah.
I think you gave us a lot. I could interview you all day. Appreciate it. Thank you, Arnie.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Terry Schwartz, and I just want to say a few things. One, thank you, Molly, for inviting me today. It's a great honor to be here to celebrate Jonathan. And I was very moved by this beautiful celebration of Jonathan's life. And I'd like to say that Jonathan was my friend, and he knew how to be a great friend. He was always there for me, and I want to just send my love and good wishes to you, Molly, certainly, and to your whole family. But Jonathan was my friend. We made a lot of wonderful work together. It'd take me too long to talk about it, but we had a great time. We laughed and laughed so hard together. I learned so much from him about filmmaking, and it was a great pleasure to be in his company, to produce some work for him, and to learn so much from him. He was a great person, filled with so much light and laughter and love and integrity and extraordinary talent. So thank you for letting me come today and to celebrate Jonathan, and coming today with all my love and to say goodbye and celebrate my great friend. Thank you.
I first met Jonathan when I got hired to do a series of films for Showtime called the Rebel Highway series, where I got to work with a bunch of different directors. And I remember when I realized I was going to get to work with the director of Heart Like a Wheel, which I was a big fan of, I was, like giddy. And he was a wonderful person to work with. I mean, his father being a composer, he knew about music, and he had always had very good instincts and very solid things. And I'm really pleased that we got to work on a number of projects together. Not enough, in my opinion, and we both agreed that one of the sad things is that we didn't get to work on more together. But as Jeff Freilich mentioned, we worked on a series called Picture Windows, and Jonathan's episode called Language of the Heart was about a violinist and a ballerina. And I remember reading the script, and the script said the violinist plays a haunting melody. And literally the success of that film was going to be in a large part based upon how successful I was going to be with this piece of music that had to be haunting and memorable. And Jonathan was very encouraging, loved what I did. And in fact, when we finished the whole project and we were dubbing the film up in Toronto, I was at the dub, and I'll never forget that at the end of the film, on the last freeze frame, there came up For Saul Kaplan, which was Jonathan's father. And I was so moved because I knew that, who Saul Kaplan was and Jonathan's father. And I said, "Oh my God, Jonathan." And Jonathan turned to me and said, "My father would be proud." And one of the reasons I wanted to tell that story is because about a week before Jonathan passed away, I was visiting him in his house, and there was a grand piano sitting in his living room. And I said, I knew he didn't play piano, and Molly, his daughter, didn't play piano. I said, "Whose piano is this?" So that's my father's piano. And I'll let Molly tell you the story of the history of that piano because it's pretty impressive. But I remember sitting down at the piano, and the first thing that I played was the theme from Language of the Heart because it kind of brought the whole thing full circle.
Wasn't it Leonard Bernstein's piano?
It's actually George Gershwin's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, George. Yeah, when he got custody of the piano, when Jonathan's father died, the piano was given to his sister, who still lived in New York, and she didn't have anybody play it, and she didn't have it tuned and stuff. And Jonathan, and then when she passed away, I guess two and a half years ago, he called Steinway about getting it refurbished to bring it back to life because it had been kind of abused for 15 years. And they said, "Well, we need the serial number." And when they got the serial number to Steinway, if I'm telling this story completely from memory, but I'm pretty sure this is correct, the phone got really quiet when they read off the serial number, and they said, "Well, are you sure that's the phone number? That's the serial number?" And he said, "Yes, I'm sure." He says, "Well, the only registration we have for that is George Gershwin." It turns out that George Gershwin, that Ira Gershwin, his brother, used to play a weekly card game with Saul Kaplan. And then when George Gershwin passed away, he left the piano to his brother, and his brother either sold it or lost it, I don't know which it is, to Saul Kaplan. And so Saul Kaplan's piano was the one that George Gershwin had in his apartment in New York.
That's incredible.
Crazy story. I mean, I think about, a week later, Jonathan passed away, and obviously I was very saddened by that. He was an important person in my life and in my career. And I will always remember that as like kind of the gift was, "Hummy, you got to sit down and play George Gershwin's piano before you leave here." And he would. And in fact, I was there one day, and he said, "You have to come back on another day because I'm going to get out. Have them put me in a wheelchair and put me next to the piano so I can watch you play the piano." And so I was there 2 days playing the piano for him, and it was a very special moment for me, Yeah, it was pretty great, and we had great stories about when we worked on In Cold Blood together. Jonathan, wanted me. I ended up setting Perry's lyrics to music, and so we actually, Eric Roberts actually performed some of the songs that were supposedly written by this guy. But it was really weird because it was an uncanny thing when Jonathan first contacted me, and I had to figure out, well, what kind of music would this guy play? And I figured, okay, maybe some kind of bluesy thing that he might have learned in prison from some, fellow prisoner. And then it turns out that Eric Roberts was in an accident many years ago and can't straighten out his fingers. So I had to figure out, well, how am I going to make him play guitar? And I thought, well, I'll do bottleneck guitar. And, we'll just slide the bottleneck up and down the neck of the guitar. And it turns out that the early slides were medicine bottles. So when we were trying to figure out what kind of music that Perry would have played, we figured out it would be this bluesy thing. And Eric Roberts, who was in an accident many years ago, can't straighten out his fingers. So I figured, well, let's do bottleneck blues. And he could wear the medicine bottle on his finger, and which the medicine bottles turned out to be the early bottleneck slides were medicine bottles. And so it was almost like hauntingly strange that we put all these pieces together. And Jonathan just always, gave me these challenges that were fantastic, and various styles of music. I mean, I did a jazz score for him, a classical score for him, this bluesy score. And I remember when we did In Cold Blood, we had a screening at the Writers Guild, I think, theater, and Robert Halmy Sr., who was the executive producer, came up to me at the end and congratulated me. And I said, "Why are you congratulating me?" He says, "Well, Halmy, I've made about 400 TV movies and miniseries, and this score best matches the picture than any other score that anyone has ever done for any one of my pictures. It fit like a glove." And I think that it was like all these strange things that came together. It was just amazing.
Well, talk to me about when you first said, when you're going to start a project with Jonathan, the conversations that start. Is he referencing composers for classical music, or is he referencing film compositions?
He was able to reference many things. I remember actually on In Cold Blood, they first came to me with this kind of a small budget, and Jonathan said, "You're going to need more money than that because of what concept we came up with." And that concept we came up with was Bernard Herrmann meets Ry Cooder, and so it was a combination of these two things. And I remember we got on the phone with Robert Halmy Sr., and I was on the phone call, which was pretty amazing. And Jonathan is explaining to Robert Halmy Sr. that, we're about to remake In Cold Blood, which is considered one of the great art film noirs of Hollywood, And he said, if we don't do it right, we're going to be lambasted. And he talked Robert Halmy Sr. into doubling the music budget. So now we had this big music budget, and we had this concept that Bernard Herrmann meets Ry Cooder. We hired an orchestra for, weeks down the road. And when I started doing the mock-ups of the first couple of cues, Jonathan and I looked at each other and said, "No, that's not the right approach. It's too big." And Jonathan kept on saying, "These aren't really bad guys. They're out on a romp." He kept on using the word romp, and it just kind of like, what does he mean by this? And finally what ended up happening is we canceled this 85-piece orchestra that we had hired for 3 days, and we ended up doing it with the largest group was 14 musicians. A lot of it was electronics, and they had slide guitar, dobro, mandolin, things of that sort. And it was a completely different approach than what we thought at the beginning, and we brought it in for way less than the budget was, and so we all turned out being heroes. So it was great, and but Jonathan was great to work with. I mean, the only time that we ever disagreed on something was there was one cue on In Cold Blood, I remember, and he said, "I think you're wrong," and I said, "Okay, well let me try your version. I'll try my version, and we'll see which one you like." And much to his, I'm not saying this because I quote unquote won, but he definitely saw my vision was actually being better supporting his picture than the vision that he thought he wanted to go for originally.
It was actually the thing it's funny, I was going to ask you if there was ever any instance where you presented something to him and he said no, and later on he's like, "Wait, that's it."
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, we basically saw eye to eye pretty much on all the stuff that I worked on for him. And, I did well by him. The Language of the Heart episode with the violin concerto type piece ended up winning the Emmy for Best Score for that year, for episodic television, which, considering how many episodic television episodes there are every year is remarkable. Yeah, I remember going to the Emmys with him, and I didn't think I was going to win, but I remember I got a limousine and I picked up him and Julie, who were still married at the time, and my wife, and we went down to the Emmy Awards together. We left with an award, so that was pretty cool.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
So, in 2003, I came out to Los Angeles to start on ER, and Jonathan actually directed my very first episode. Slightly scary because, it's larger than life, but I very quickly learned that his bark was, wasn't as big as his bite at all. He's like just a very kind-hearted, soft man. And it's crazy to me now to think that I'd known him over 20 years at this point. We spoke most weeks. If I was away working in the UK, I'd phone him. And I remember once I didn't know how to handle something on set, and he'd help me figure that out. Towards the end of his life, which is still really odd to say, I'd sort of phoned to, sorry. I'd phoned to vent sometimes to Jonathan, and I stopped doing that as much. But he knew me so well, he could hear it in my voice. He'd go, "Come on, sweetie, what is it?" And I go, "Oh, it's nothing, And he goes, "Come on, I know you, what's going on?" And he'd always be there just to listen to, any old thing, or I was trying to always make him laugh with stories of my teenager, because how's a teenager? So I tell him some stupid thing that Kai had done, and, he'd crack up. But one of my fondest memories was, I remember we were doing a scene in one of the admit rooms, and one of the extras kept getting in the way of my shot. And he's like, cut. He goes, "She's the money," right? He goes, "It's like the fucking Raquettes in here," right? And I just remember just burst out laughing, and just his niece was just saying out there as well, he was always so great at bringing the best out of actresses, and I witnessed it firsthand, and I was one of the people that was lucky enough to get that from him as well. If there was an argument that was happening in a scene or anything like, he was okay, by take third or fourth take, he'd go, "Just give it to him," right? And I was like, "It's not too much?" He's like, "No." And I was like, "I don't look like a lemon?" He's a lemon. What is a lemon? But yeah, it's crazy to me to think that I've known him or knew him for such a long period, and that he was such a big part of my life on a week-to-week basis. And I really miss him.
How would you describe Kaplan? 2 sentences.
2 sentences?
Yeah.
A big-hearted, person that just knew how to love life and help people.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I didn't think I was gonna lie.
You said it.
Yeah.
And I really, you really contextualize it, because he's kind of very, very, he's a very big presence, but he's very gentle, and he was there for everyone that he cared for. It's really.
He always just
20 years is a long time.
Yeah, he really just got to the truth of who people were, I think, very quickly. Yeah.
When you guys screen stuff, would he show up?
For the show?
Edits of the show?
Yeah, and I was lucky enough, actually, and I don't know if they've ever done it since, but when I joined the show, and John Wells had written the show, and they did a screening of it one lunchtime. It was everybody was there, and it was very humbling, and everybody turned up you know, to see it. But his direction, not just on that show, but in life, I'm going to miss. He was incredible to work with, and it's just seeing even some of the shots that they showed from ER on there, the up shots. I felt like I got to sort of have one of his classic shots. It felt like it was one of those shots, but he just, you know, just to also see him prep to walk around that set every weekend, just to really write everything out and make sure everybody knew what, like, he was so prepared that you didn't have, you weren't going to fail. He had you. He really held you, and you really felt that.
Perfect place to end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tell me about your first memory with Jonathan.
Well, it was pretty specific. I was 17 years old, and I had already decided that movies were something I wanted to do. And I was actually making little films in high school. And I went out and saw a movie called White Line Fever, which was just an amazing movie. I remember just thinking, I think I saw it twice with my girlfriend when we were in high school. And I remember the director was Jonathan Kaplan. And then about 8 years later, I met someone who knew Jonathan and knew John Davison and knew all those guys. And I was a reader at Columbia Pictures at the time. And eventually, I got to meet Jonathan, and it was like I was meeting a real film director because he had made White Line Fever. Now, he made other things eventually, but that was the one I knew of him. And then I wrote a script called RoboCop, and when it was in a first draft form, I thought, if only I could get Jonathan to read it. And my friend got us together, and he said he would read it. And I'd already heard of this guy, John Davison, before. And I knew he was this really interesting producer out there. And Jonathan read it, and he said, well, you know, he said something, he might have said, I don't know if this is for me, but you know who it's for. It's for John Davison. And so really, in that moment, Jonathan gave me a career in the movie business. And he introduced me to John, and everything else after that happened as it should have, more or less, at least in my version, maybe not in John Davison's. But anyway, Jonathan was there for that. And it was interesting hearing how many people he did that for. And he always took me rather seriously, even though I'm not sure why he would have, because he only met me a few times. And then he read my script, which is, as you know, a hard thing to get anybody to do, and was instrumental in what happened after that.
It's funny, it's sort of true to him because the way that he was just thrust into the director's position, and he's just as easy gave anyone an opportunity that he really liked, you know.
Yeah, it seemed kind of, I wouldn't say normal at the time. It seemed like, but now when I look back on it, it's very unusual that people did that for people that they were so openly encouraging to a creative group. And anyway, it was always, I will never forget Jonathan for that. Interesting to hear the stories about his youth growing up as a red diaper baby in New York among all that stuff. That's fascinating. Somebody should do a story about that.
I also want to ask you about John and RoboCop, but it will be off topic here. But the script, after John got it, tell me about that.
Oh, well, John, I remember saying, well, should I send the script? Should we messenger the script over to you? Because that's what people did in those days. And he was like, I'm not going to spend money on a messenger. And he met me in a parking lot at the corner of, it was Ventura and Laurel Canyon. And I gave him the script. And he said, I'll get back to you. And then he called me back about 3 days later and said, I think I'd like to do it. And it was sort of amazing. That it went that way. Of course, it wasn't that easy, but it seemed like it was at the time. Then we were encouraged. My partner Michael Miner and I were encouraged to do a second draft paid by Orion, and we did. And John was very encouraging about that, and let the script be what it was supposed to be, I think. He didn't try to put anything on it. And we were enthusiastic, and we wrote a better script even than that. And then slowly but surely it went to directors who all said no and that sort of thing. And the script continued to evolve a little bit.
Did Jonathan ever see RoboCop, do you know?
I wonder what his thoughts would have been, right?
He must have seen it. Wouldn't
Did he
see
ever talk to you about it? I don't know if he ever mentioned it to me.
Well, if he didn't mention it to you, then he wouldn't have. Then
Well, I don't know.
How odd.
I mean, I don't hardly remember this morning, but
Did Jonathan watch a lot of the pictures, the screenplays that you wrote, and that ended up becoming movies?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we ever. I mean, I haven't written that much stuff. So, but he handed that to John, and then I think he was vaguely going to be a director, and then he probably got tired of talking to me and said, "I got to go to something else." But I actually remember another time with Jonathan when before that happened, he actually. Oh, I'm glad you kept me going here. He actually said, "Hey, why don't you? I'm going to meet on this picture called the Philadelphia Experiment, and I'm meeting a special effects guy. Why don't you come with me?" So he just took me to this meeting, and I was the kid in the meeting with this thing, and it was a movie he was going to make. I don't think he ended up making the Philadelphia Experiment, but it was he would do things like that, and I thought that was in retrospect. Not too many people do that sort of thing. You just encourage that kind of easy encouragement that he was able to give people.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
good story.
Okay, Michael, tell me your first memory of Jonathan.
Well, it probably goes back to 10 years old or maybe younger, but we went to the same school, Walden School. And I mentioned in the memorial, families were friendly and all this, but I don't know how it came about, but I ended up writing little sketches for Jonathan and I to perform. I was the straight man, he was the comedian. And it was like he either played the French teacher or he played the head of the school, and I would be either a student or a parent. And all I can remember vividly is giving him the first sketch. It was like 2 pages. I'm in math class, and our teacher, Stanley, we all call the teachers by their first name, and he's at the door of the classroom with the glass window going like this. He was like so excited, and the teacher turns around and opens the door and says, what the hell's going on? And he goes, it's great, I can't, like this. And the teacher says, what's going on here? Like, stop the middle of the class. This is a math class, And so that's my first really strong impression of Jonathan. Another little anecdote, and then I'm going to sort of get to the heart of what I wanted to talk about. The other one was he had just finished his second movie, Student Teachers. He had come out to L.A. I had come out to L.A. to go to film school, but he was the first of the whole NYU crowd, and in fact, the leader of all of us. I was a little younger, who started directing. So he had been very helpful in introducing me to the people at New World, but he was looking for a place to live. And my girlfriend, first wife at the time, were moving out of this place on Stanley Hills Drive in Laurel Canyon, $135 a month. And so Jonathan had been there, and I said, listen, we're going to move out in a month. It's going to become available. He says, oh, I love it. I want to take it. And I said, well, you got to meet the landlady. Her name was Sue Neihart, and she's a very strange woman. It's the only time that Jonathan Kaplan didn't read the room properly. And I said, now look, she's very weird, and she has forced us to keep all the furniture, which was terrible. I said we had to keep the bed, we have to keep the kitchen table, the dining, the couch. We can't change anything. So Jonathan goes, I get it. If I'm 24, he's 26. Comes in, and he looks around. He meets Sue Neihart. He says, I love this place. This place is fantastic. Oh, my God, it's so wonderful. And she's already getting suspicious. And she goes, what about the furniture? And he goes, I love the furniture.
I'll keep it as exactly as it is. It's now. Now she knows he's lying, and she goes, what sign are you? And he goes, Sagittarius. And she looks at him and says, I don't rent to Sagittarius. And and it's like I'm there with my girlfriend / wife, and he's there, and it's like this whole thing is going south. Anyway, he leaves, calls me later. That lady is insane. That is not. And I'm thinking, Jonathan, I don't know what happened. Of course, he did not rent the apartment, but it's such a strong implant in my mind. We used to laugh about it for years when Sue Neihart said, "What sign are you, Sagittarius?" The one thing I did want to talk about and share with the family was the camaraderie of the children of the Blacklist. I had mentioned my father. He was also a director, theater director, but also was in the early days of live television. And by 1952, he was summarily fired from a CBS contract, and he didn't work for 12 to 13 years in his chosen field. He went back to teaching, and Jonathan knew all about it and was, we had a kind of camaraderie about it. And I'll never forget when my father finally got to direct the very first episode that brought him back in 1965 of an episode of The Defenders, which was a great TV series. We all watched it in New York, and it starred Lee Grant as a guest, who was also a very badly blacklisted actress. And the next day, Jonathan just said, that was one of the best episodes of The Defenders. Your father did such a great job. It was like he was the greatest cheerleader for all of us. And he was, for getting my career started. The single most poignant experience I had with Jonathan was at this screening of Salt of the Earth, which was the film that his father had written the score for, which was a very controversial left communist film made in Mexico at the height of the blacklist. He got a screening of it in the 1980s. And at this screening were a lot of children of the blacklist. And I ran into a woman whom he grew up with in the same building as a child, Elizabeth Offner. Her name was Buffy. Beautiful girl. I was 32 at the time, and Buffy was 34. And I met her at that screening. I hadn't seen her since I was a teenager. And we fell in love. And it was one of the great romances of my life. Jonathan was thrilled. He was like, oh my God, you and Buffy, this is great, And then Buffy got sick. I was 35, she was 37, and she got cancer. And it was the single most traumatic event in my life. She died after 2.5 months. But she was at the UCLA hospital, and Jonathan and other friends were there, but he would come every day to UCLA, and he'd sit there at lunch break, whether he was editing a film or something. He couldn't have been shooting, or maybe he was, but he would get to UCLA, and he'd sit with me, say nothing, was nothing to be said, just be there. And at the memorial, I've never seen Jonathan more fall apart than he did over Buffy's death. I mean, I was destroyed for 2 years, and then he would check in with me and always want to know how I was doing. But he was there for me in a very, very big way, as everyone has sort of said how he was. But since we were sharing the roles of director, I wasn't working for him and he wasn't working for me, but we had this connection. And that one was the single biggest connection I ever had with Jonathan.
That's tremendous.
Yep.
That's insane.
It's end of story. But
Yeah,
we
it says it all. It's crazy. He's had so much, instances like this, and yet he was also such a great family man.
Oh.
How do you need 3 people to give that much?
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and he was able to do it, all of it, at the same time. I never, you know.
And work.
Yeah.
At the same time. It's crazy.
I mean, I have video. I'm going to look for it of when him visiting me post Buffy's death, and I checked out. I checked out for a year and a half. I didn't work. You know, I was 35, 36. I disappeared, but eventually came back. But he was there. He was there. He knew what I was going through. Great person, great human being, brilliantly talented, made some great films, and beautiful work, which we saw today, and a great father and family member, and tried his damnedest at marriage. He and I have been through those wars. We've commiserated, but I wouldn't change anything about any of it.
Thank you, man.
My pleasure.
The gang, take one.
Okay. Let's go one at a time, and we'll make it brief so we can fit everyone together, right?
100%. You, yep.
Tell me about the first time you met Jonathan.
I had the privilege of working on a television series called ER, and I was the first assistant director on the series. And Jonathan Kaplan was hired as a director of an episode. And that was the first time I had the privilege of meeting him. And I couldn't, when you're a first AD on a series, when you're trying to kind of like work with directors that come and go, the objective is to try and see what you can do to help facilitate making it easy for them, as well as earning their trust. Because earning trust, to me, became a very, very critical factor in being able to work together on the series. And Jonathan Kaplan came in. I did a little bit of research in terms of what he had done before, and I recognized that he had a vast body of work to his credit. So I said, okay, here is a guy that's coming in with a lot of knowledge and experience, and it is an opportunity for me to kind of like learn from him. And that's where it started, and I loved working with him. There was so much, when you're a first assistant director on a television series, there are two paths that most first ADs want to kind of take. One is either want to direct series, or the other one would be to become a line producer, production manager, producer. I always chose the directorial path, and I made that very kind of clear to him that this is what I wanted to do, and in my own way, not kind of like making it very in the face. I said, but on this show, I'm your first assistant director. I want to be there to help you get the best possible show, and anything that I can do to make it easy for you, please let me know. What are your do's and don'ts and things like that, right? And he wanted to know more about me. I said, what brought you here? What brought you to Hollywood? So I had to kind of like tell him where I came from, where I started, and I had the privilege of working with an actor by the name of Terence Hill, who Jonathan had worked with. And I said, and I had done a couple of films with him, and so he immediately drew an affection towards me just because I'd worked with this actor. And that's where it started for me, you know. And there I was, you know, kind of, you know, trying to learn as much as I can, absorb from him. You know, you always, you know, wanted to make sure when we broke for lunch, he had his Diet Coke. And when you broke for lunch, you wanted to make sure that his trailer had all blacked out so he could take his nap. So those were, and his burrito. You had to get his freaking burrito.
And have his apple box for him to sit.
Yeah, and apple box was something that went with him wherever he went. You know, it was like attached to him. So you know, I mean, and then, you know, there was one day, ER is the kind of show where you have like 100 background, lighting is already ready, everybody's waiting for the AD to set the background, right? That's always the drill every day. So one day I'm trying to you know, the lighting is ready, I'm trying to set the background, 100 people, it's a big freaking Steadicam shot. Dave Kamaris is on the camera. And so we did one rehearsal, right? He calls me up and says, Babu, that fucking Spendrick over there. I said, Spendrick, what? I don't know. The Spendrick word rang a lot of bells to me. Which Spendrick? From then on, from that day, I started using the word Schmendrick on every time I started working background. And I wanted to learn more about these Yiddish words. I said, what are these? Stamil and Shamazel and Schmendrick. And I started, so Jonathan was my coach, trying to teach me Yiddish words. And finally, when my son got married...
It didn't end well.
When my son got married in 2023, up in Aspen, I gave my wedding speech in Yiddish. That's my story with Jonathan.
Jonathan.
You're a real mensch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, mine's a lot simpler than that.
It couldn't be more complicated.
Mine's
it's only a 4-hour show.
Yeah, literally. I had no idea who Kaplan was, and or anything about him. At this point, I'm working on the set on camera, and then it's a new episode, and Jonathan walks in. So here's this guy in looks like Santa Claus. He's got like a black shirt, black pants, black sandals, and he's got this old black folder. And I'm thinking, who the fuck is this guy? Anyway, so we start, and right off the bat, the folder comes open, and the apple box sits down, and like, oh. And so life begins. Anyway, from that moment on, I had nothing but admiration and respect, and we laughed constantly all day. Yep. And because he'd have his Yiddish words that he would say about people. I from London would have my Cockney rhyming slang. So between the two of us, we got this whole thing going this whole time. But in time, what a wonderful friendship and relationship. And as I said earlier on, that as we age, you can probably count people that you respect and have closeness to probably on one hand. He's one of those guys that I had the utmost respect for. And Jonathan, like so many others, was the instigator for me to start my directing career. He was the one that got me started, that gave me confidence. Because I remember one day we were coming into one of the scenes in the ERs, and he come up to me and he said, "Right, you're directing this scene." I was like, "What? Excuse me?" He's like, "Yeah, no, you're directing this scene. You know the script, here's the thing, so you direct this scene." So that's what happened. He gave me the scene, I directed the scene, we got through it, and then we carried on. And that was the way he built confidence within people. And at that point, once he moved forward, gave me the confidence, moved forward, the producers of the show gave them confidence, and I ended up directing a couple of shows on ER and started directing other shows from there on. So I have nothing but the utmost respect, and I had so much fun working with this man that he has a real big soft spot in my heart that I'll always have and remember and respect. And he also taught me the logistics and the basics of directing, setting up the format, which I still used right until my last episode that I finished directing. So anyway, nothing but love for the guy. That's me. I'm done. Thank you.
What's your last name?
Nightingale, Terrence.
What show did you recently?
NCIS Los Angeles.
Yeah. I've seen all your work.
Okay.
You're an operator.
Yeah, Dave Comides. I was met the same time that they did. He showed up on set as a director, and it was like, who the hell is this? But okay. And I sort of mentioned that there. On the weekend, I came in with him like I did with a lot of new directors, because ER was using Steadicam on a level that, weren't. And just said, if you'd like me to, I'd love to run through scenes with you, whatever I can do. So I showed up, and within 20 minutes, he was asking me what I thought, and I just was sort of blown away by that, because usually it was like, I want to do this, is it going to work or whatever, but he really honestly wanted to know, and by the end of that, or maybe the end of the next week or whatever it was, he was asking me when I was going to direct, which I thought was nuts, and he went upstairs and said, you got to give this kid a shot, and they ended up doing it for me, and he sat with me through the whole process. Making sure that I was doing the work, but making sure that I understand what needed to be done, and went through the entire script line by line with me. I mean, just unbelievable, so supportive, and such a wonderful guy. Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite things are just being around the corner and hearing, Terrence, Terry, Terry, yeah, scream your name out.
Babu!
Babu! And that sort of like that sort of angriness that he had that was just masking the love that was behind it. He was just a wonderful, wonderful guy, and some of my favorite moments, truthfully, in this industry are with Jonathan Kaplan, and also some of the realist moments, because he had this way. We were talking with a bunch of people out there. I think he had this way. He had like he had a bullshit meter, and he would instantly. Someone mentioned this. I don't know who it was. Maybe it was Tony. So he would instantly know when someone else was bullshitting, but he would also instantly know when he was, like when he wasn't being genuine. And I think that's why he probably was so great with actors, because while he was, careful with them and knew how to work with them, he could tell when something wasn't as sincere and as real as it could be, and he could very easily, by throwing one little piece in there, strip that away. And I can't tell you how many times I'd have my eye in the eyepiece and watch a performance, and he'd go in and whisper something, and it was like just throwing a new ingredient in the cauldron, and something completely new came out. He was such a talented individual. Yeah. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that people trusted him, and I think that people trusted him because they knew that deep down inside he cared. As long as you were genuine. If you weren't genuine, he didn't care. Yeah. But he didn't suffer fools. He was an incredible man and an incredible part of my career, all of our careers.
Yeah. I also, Molly, I also want to add that the other wonderful thing about the old man, this was more technical about him as a director, but as a person, the other thing is like he touched all our kids, because every Christmas...
You might want to say that differently in this day and age.
Yeah, sorry. Emotionally. Yeah, thank you, Dave, for making me politically correct. Touching our kids emotionally. But we had for many years, we had an ER Christmas party on the PCH at a particular club, and Jonathan always was Santa Claus. And he was always so amazing with all our kids as they were growing up. Yeah. And they went through all this whole wonderful experience, and Jonathan played the whole thing out. And it's like my kids today that are in their early 30s and onwards have this memory of your dad, who is this wonderful, wonderful man that just gave, and of course you know that. But anyway, that's a lighter note.
Well, and the other part of that, you guys remember this when Molly used to come to set when she was super little, and I'm sure she probably disappeared to Crafty and then came back. But she would stand there, just the smile on his face of having his daughter on set. I remember that so well. And I think she was overwhelmed by everything. She was pretty quiet.
Yeah. And I think she would always correct him as well at times, because he would sometimes use a swear word or something, and she'd slap him and go, "Dad, you can't use that," and he would just laugh and chuckle. You're right, Molly. Yeah, little things like that.
Babu, get me a Diet Coke.
Just so special. Yeah.
And as he got older, and we would go out for go to the deli and get sandwiches or whatever. it was always like an article that you were in, or she did this, or she's doing this. We would always talk about you because he would always. He'd sort of let me tell him about my kids, and I could tell he was just getting through it. And then he'd go, "Let me tell you about Molly," which was fantastic and always so interesting. So he was the best.
Yeah.
It's crazy just going through, talking to everybody, and just seeing how many opportunities he gave to everybody.
Totally.
It just was like,
amazing.
I believe in you. Go
He believed in people.
Do it.
Yeah. What a giver.
Yeah.
What a giver.
There's no question about
Yeah,
it.
to have that. And you know the other thing is that a lot of that rubbed off on all of us.
There's no question.
Because we
He
all
led by
have
example.
that same mentality through our careers. I know Babu, Dave, and myself. With other shows that we've been on, we've been nothing more than want to support younger members of the crew, not just in camera, but in other departments as well, just to share that giving and encouragement, and also education about set education. And like, yes, this is a serious business, but it's also a fun business, and you can also have fun. And I know that all of us have done nothing but want to share that experience with the younger members that have come through in the industry, and a lot of that is down to what Jonathan had shared with us.
No question.
The whole, I mean, somebody said it in that room that the secret to this business is really the person-to-person, the mentorship.
It's the only
That's
thing.
the only way
Yeah.
that this thing's going.
Totally. It's what this whole business is about. You know, originally in the early days, the only way you could get into the business generally was via family or knowing somebody in family.
Yep.
That was the only way you could get into the film business. You know, when I first started, that was exactly the way it was. My father was in the business. That's how I got in.
What did he do?
You know, my dad was a boom operator.
Yeah.
His dad was the pink shorts boom operator on Star Wars.
Yeah, and both my kids are in the business, so you know it's like third generation. Yeah.
Yeah. I came up in camera. It's always funny. Like, you know, you make friends with the Grips. I'm from New York, so there's like 3 or 4 generations of Grip families.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
My dad was a Grip. My great.
Yeah, the Lowrys. They're like, yeah, my dad had card number 001.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
My great grandfather was a Grip. My great great grandfather was a shoemaker.
Who was the key grip that worked with, the deep Gordon Willis?
Gordy's.
The key grip.
I forget his name, but yeah.
It's a whole family.
That's a whole.
There's a
family.
couple of whole families
Right,
in New
right.
York that, yeah.
Don't you work with Ed Lockman?
I haven't worked with Ed Lockman. I would like to work with Ed Lockman. No, I wish.
thought you were on Carol. Never mind.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Nope.
Another good-looking camera operator.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Well, we got to wrap this up, Molly.
Have you checked out David's?
Babu will sit here and
I
talk
gotta
to you
go
for 12
eat.
hours.
But I got to drag him out.
I've seen you.
But more importantly, have you checked out David's podcast?
He is my age.
I mean, it's one of the when you talk about camera operation.
More importantly,
tell him about it.
It's the op.io. But the thing is, most importantly, is I sat down and I did a podcast with Jonathan. That's one of my favorite ones ever. And if you want to talk about capturing the essence of Jonathan, it's not because of me. It's because he just sat there and talked about his history. It's fantastic.
But not only Jonathan. Well,
The op.
besides Jonathan, but
Yeah.
the craft of camera operation is also what it focuses on.
He just wants me to buy him lunch.
And
Absolutely no one ever. I was hired for a guest role on an episode of what was then by far the biggest show on television. The producers dangled that there was a chance the character might recur. I thought that was nice, but I didn't count on it. My first shooting day, I came to set to rehearse. Noah, Wiley, and Laura Innes were among the cast in that scene. We read it through, and then it was time to put it on its feet. And as instructed, I went out into the hall to await my entrance. I don't know if it was scripted, but for some reason I was chewing gum. Anyway, action! The scene starts, I hear my cue and make my entrance, taking my time, chewing away at my gum, chewing away at the scenery, and suddenly I hear this voice bellowing, "Cut, cut, cut, God damn it!" And here comes Jonathan barreling onto set, moving much faster than I thought it would. No, Paul, listen. You can't just come in here and act like you're just casually hanging around. You've got a million things to do. You blow in, you deliver your orders, and then you go. It's bang, 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 and then you get the hell out. And then, as he was walking away, he tossed, "Save that shit for Chicago Hope." So I reset and I thought 2 things. This is going to be fun and Yeah. Now, I spent the last 20 years mostly directing episode television, and I owe that very much to Jonathan. He championed my getting my first opportunity, and he was by far my biggest cheerleader, teacher, mentor, and directing rabbi, not to mention one of my best friends. I loved him. I'm extraordinarily grateful to Jonathan for more than I can say. And this past year, we spoke on the phone a lot. Back in June, I got to spend a couple of hours with him at the rehab. Shortly before he went home. And as always, we talked about Molly, politics, and film, pretty much in that order. He held overflowingly at how Dr. Molly handled the doctors, nurses, admin people, all the details. You know this, Molly, wherever you are. But anyway, yeah. I get it. You know, I'm going off script. When you were little, Jonathan on set, on ER, came to me one day and said, Molly came to me and said, Dad, I'm learning French. And he said, oh, really? Tell me to speak French to me. And he said, you said to him at the age of, I don't know, 10, oh, shit, I stubbed my fucking toe. But you couldn't help but just laugh at it and love him, of course. Anyway, so, yeah. So, anyway, when I was visiting Jonathan, I reminded him of the story I just told you of my first day, and we had a good laugh. And I've told that story many times over the years, but something dawned on me right as I was with him. In that one wonderfully abusive direction, he gave me what was a fundamental core aspect of the character, and I hadn't realized that before talking to him about it. So not only do I largely owe my directing career to him, I owe my acting stint on ER to him, because that carried through for that character the whole time. Anyway, I feel really fortunate to have made that realization and made it with him, in front of him, and got to thank him for it. And it gets said too often about people, but he was definitely one of a kind. Smart, insightful, exceptionally talented and skilled, and yes, passionate. The only thing bigger than his bark was his heart. And he was perhaps an acquired taste, but one well worth acquiring. So that's my 2 cents. I have an email from Laura Innes, who said, asked me to read this. My first directing gig was on ER. I was terrified. I had never directed anything before, and it was quite a complicated episode. As Anthony Edwards said to me, you must be prepping in your pants. That Saturday, I walked to set for hours, planning my first few days and trying not to freak out. Jonathan offered to come in the next day so I could run some things by him. We spent hours together, and it was such a blast. He was incredibly enthusiastic and supportive and utterly generous with his time and immense knowledge. Jonathan wasn't thinking about he would direct it. He wanted me to flourish. Over the years, I reached out to him to get advice about lenses and cranes, about how to work with horses as movie stars and sexist DPs. He was always there for me. I love him and will be forever grateful for his brilliance and generosity. That's from Laura Innes. So, anybody who has any little thing or big thing they want to share about Jonathan, pass the mic.
Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Cassidy. I was Jonathan's business manager for 30 years, handling his financial affairs. But he was a great storyteller, as you all know, and there are 2 quick stories he told me that I've passed on to many people. So when he was a student at NYU, he many times would work backstage at the theater at NYU. And there was one particular performance he was working backstage, and Miles Davis was performing. So Miles had his whole combo on stage, and before it started, Miles went to Jonathan, who was on the side of the stage, and said, Jonathan, you know, I have a lot of money on this fight, and there's a TV back here, but I want you to watch the fight, and I'm going to cue you, and you got to tell me how it's going, because I got a lot of money on this fight. And Jonathan says, sure, yes, of course, Mr. Of course I'll tell you. So Miles is in the middle of the set, packed house. He stops in the very middle, walks straight off stage, looks at Jonathan and says, hey, how's the fight going? You know, I really got to know. I got a lot of money in this fight. You know, Mr. Davis, you seem to be winning. I appreciate that. Comes back on stage and finishes his set. Next day in the New York Times, they did a review on Miles' performance, and they said, you know, as brilliant as Miles Davis is, the pause in the middle of the set when he walks off stage is positively brilliant. And him coming back and finishing the set, genius. He was just checking the fights. Another good story, Mr. James Woods, who was a client of my old firm, was an immediate family with Jonathan. And so I guess Jonathan and he were in New York one day, and in the evening, Woods calls up Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan, how are you? This is Jimmy. You know, hey, Jimmy, what's going on? Well, you know, I'm across the street from you, and I'd like to meet for a drink. And Jonathan's like, great, let's meet for a drink. But I'm on the roof, Jonathan. I want you to come up on the roof and meet me on the roof. So Jonathan's like, well, Jimmy's always a little different. Sure, I'll meet you on the roof. So he meets Jimmy on the roof of the place across the street. And Jimmy goes, so, you know, what do you think of the view? And Jonathan goes, well, Jimmy, yeah, it's lovely. And, well, you know, just bounce up and down a little bit. And Jonathan's like, Jimmy, what are you talking about? Well, I'm shooting a scene on the roof of this hotel tomorrow. I was a little worried about the stability of the roof. So Jonathan's like, Jimmy, you asshole, you had me come here because of my girth? Anyway, I was sorely missing his many stories, but he was fine for 30 years. Big Dodger family would always celebrate with the Dodgers and then rip them apart about every other week. We're really going to miss him.
Hi, everybody. I am Jonathan's niece, the daughter of Nady. I think everybody has done an incredible job eulogizing my uncle. Me and my sister, we grew up not knowing him as Jonathan or Uncle Jonathan. We knew him purely as Bubber. And it's still hard for me to refer to him as anything other. He will always be Bubber to me. And that was because my mother, may she also rest in peace, his baby sister, they were 8 years apart. And when she was a toddler, she was obsessed with him. She followed him around everywhere. She also couldn't say her R's. So she'd be like, this my brother, this my Bubber. Bubber Jonathan, Bubber Jonathan. And so forever on, he held on to that nickname. He wouldn't let her stop using it because he loved that. Jonathan was a lover and a hater, but mostly a lover. But he did love to hate. Him and my mother were not only visually very similar. If you look at pictures of the two of them, they look like they could have been twins, despite the 8-year difference. They were also very similar in personality. You would walk into a room where the two of them were chatting, and you'd be like, oh God, there's two of them. So I want to tell a story just about what it was like to have such an amazing, generous uncle, and it's just a taste of the beauty that was Uncle Bubber. When I was a preteen, he stopped sending me proper gifts and started sending me checks or cash, which is something he learned from Grandma Fra. You know, who always said cash is what everybody actually wants, so why bother doing anything else? And one year, my parents were like, you know, you should probably put that in a savings account. You shouldn't really spend this. This is a lot of money for an 11-year-old to have. And so then I called my uncle to thank him for the generous birthday present, and I let him know, Mom and Dad want me to put this into a savings account. They won't want me to spend it. And he's like, excuse me? And I said, I don't think they want me to spend it all. And he's like, well, it's not their fucking money. And I'm like, I know, but they said that it would be really irresponsible for me to, and he's like, put Mady on the phone right now. And proceeded to chew her out, which he never did. Mind you, my uncle had a lot of loves in his life, all 3 wives. Obviously Molly was number 1. Also every actress he worked with. I think most people who've worked with Jonathan either professionally, either through or acting can testify that he had a way with everybody, but in particular actresses, an ability to bring them to the best of their ability. He had an innate skill to be able to figure out what their insecurities were, to dismiss those insecurities, and to be able to bring them back to be the best they could be. But going back to the story of, so a few days later, I get another thing in the mail, and it's a card from Bubber. He would always find the most beautiful cards. He'd sometimes even create collages for me. The man loved to collage. He really was just an artist by every metric. But this one, it's a beautiful, beautiful card, and in all caps, he wrote, "This is FU money. If your parents try to tell you what to do with it, you tell them to go fuck themselves." Mind you, I was barely 11. But that's how my uncle was. You know, he never lied to you. He'd never, you always knew you were going to be exactly what it was. Sometimes he'd call me the B word, always affectionately, but he would do it. But every single time I ever received any card with money or a check or even just a card, he would always write, "And don't forget, FU." And never ever forgot that. And he never ever let my mother or father dictate where those checks were going ever. He would triple call. He'd be like, "Now you know, that's Eliza's money." And that's just a taste of, you know, what a generous, incredibly kind, blunt, beautiful person he was. The last time I saw him in March, I came into his hospital room, and not the first time in my life, nor the last, I was mistaken for my mother. He said, "Me." And I knew that, and I know now, that the love that he, my mother, and Nora shared is not something that could ever be replicated. It could never. It's the most powerful thing in the world. And I feel so blessed and so honored to have been born in a family with that love. We're a very small family. Jonathan was also my grandparent as well as my uncle, because both my grandparents on both sides were already gone. He was our safety net. He was, and me and Hannah, my older sister, who I want to give a shout out because she spent a lot of time taking care of him in the last year and a half, and that can't be under stress. Her dedication. But I know that they had a really special bond as well, but the number one love of his life will and always will have been Molly. And as somebody who is a month younger than Molly, it was also just such an honor to grow up alongside her and witness the love that he had for her and see how powerful it was. You know, as his nieces, me and my sister could do no wrong unless it came to Molly. And that was the exception, you know? The only one who could ever be top, Molly. So, you know, he would always be so proud of us, but he'd always follow up with a, "Did you know Molly did this?" Or, you know, you heard that. And it's really been wonderful to see that everybody here has seen what I have seen in terms of his love for Molly, and that will continue on long after he's gone. And thank you all for being here, and I love you all now too because Bubba loved you.
I am Jonathan's first cousin. I've been finding myself talking to Jonathan a lot these days. I miss the moral outrage, which was always followed by a barrage of information and opinion, his and others. Oh, yeah, thank you very much. I could always count on him to have an opinion and to be curious. He had enormous curiosity. We were first cousins, and from the very beginning, we admired each other's cunning in dealing with our very dysfunctional families. As the oldest children, we took a lot of responsibility for our siblings, both protecting them and bossing them around. From my earliest memories, Jonathan directed the scenarios of the many games and plays that we forced our siblings to enact. They, as one of the speakers said, their house was warm and full of fun and toys. They had an enormous toy room with everything in it. Costumes, instruments, props. So you can see where this all came from. So puppets and stuffed animals were commandeered to do unspeakable things, which, as I remember, Jonathan and I stood back and encouraged and waited for them to get into trouble. I really miss Jonathan's passion and his total delight in movies, baseball, things that he could learn about with his enormous curiosity. There was never a sacred cow that he couldn't shoot, or an endangered species that he didn't try to rescue. His generosity and genuine compassion was legendary and tireless. He really cared. Because we were each other's peers from childhood, we understood and shared our family's stories. This is the hardest loss for me, because the memories that stayed alive in us never needed to be explained. We just got it. Jonathan was a force of creative energy and love and humor and great, great kindness. He wasn't affectionately called Big Daddy for nothing. And he was brave. In those last couple of years, he was so very, very brave. And so these days, I summon Jonathan when I want to say, God, you're not going to believe this, because I could always expect that exquisite moral outrage. I am so glad he is finally at peace and at rest, but I miss him deeply.
My name is Diana Gould. I didn't prepare anything, but I cried more today than I did at my parents' memorial. When I met Jonathan, I was 14 and he was 11. And I was just going into high school and he was on Broadway. He was in Dark at the Top of the Stairs, and Fra was understudying the lead, Teresa Wright. And I was apprehensive about starting high school. And he said, just ask people what their favorite song is. And Jonathan's family, Jonathan's parents, as Tim so beautifully evoked, I was so fortunate to be one of those red drop diaper babies that grew up in that milieu in New York, running around. And what Tim said was so accurate about the values that we got from our parents of collaboration and standing up for your principles. And whenever I saw Jonathan and Nora and Beatty and now Hannah and Eliza and maybe Molly are the only people that still call me Deanie, which was my name when I was growing up. And they're my family. Well, I made a video for each of my parents when they died, and the only people that aren't blood relatives in those videos are the Kaplans, because they were my second family, and they were my better family. And whenever I saw Jonathan, it was as if no time had elapsed. I saw him throughout the years. We weren't as close when we were all working, but then towards the end, when we weren't working anymore, he gave me a wonderful blurb for my book. And whenever I saw him, it was as if no time had passed. I feel like he's my brother. I feel like I've lost my brother.
I worked briefly for Jonathan and Kenny Friedman, who I just saw.
20s. I was 22. Can you not hear? Okay. They were crazy, crazy, chaotic days, absolutely unforgettable days. I actually blame those days and Jonathan for my cognitive behavior impairment now. Drugs. Anyway, life shifted. I left, I raised a family, and although we kept in touch for a little bit, time does, and we drift. Fast forward decades, I'm sitting in a salon getting my hair cut, and all of a sudden I heard this voice. It was Jonathan. I hadn't talked to him in 35 years. Is Jen here? I hear that voice, I whip my head around, and I see Jonathan sitting, getting his hair cut, his beard trimmed. So I launch myself out of the chair, and I go, Jonathan, Jonathan. I jump on his lap, he gives me a hug, and I said, lunch? And he goes, yes, lunch. So we had lunch, and when it was over, I said, we didn't have time to catch up. It was too quick. I said, can we do this again? And he said, every day, we'll do it again. And that was 13, 14 years ago. And since that time, he was a very large and beautiful presence in my life. There were lots of times I needed a shoulder to cry on, and that was Jonathan. When I needed to laugh, he would always make me roar. I kept in touch with the family. I remember Maddie, I know all of the kids. He was kind and generous and adorable and exasperating in the best way, and always, always so full of heart. Molly, there was never a time when we didn't talk about you. I was astonished by your accomplishments. He was always bursting with pride. And yes, he desperately wanted to be a grandfather. I'd say, chill out, calm down. If it happens, it happens. Nothing, and he'd look at me, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. And he'd give a sigh, and he'd say, I just want her to be happy. And I said, yeah, that's what every parent wants to. My husband, Sam, passed away in April of this year, and Jonathan called me, and he was very, very devastated. He got to know Sam pretty well. He said to me, he was the healthy one. Why are all the old Jews dying? What's going on? I don't get it. So, that's true. There's several of the old Jews that have come and gone, but I miss them like crazy.
Hello, everybody. I'm wife number 2. Tammy Ludwig. And Jonathan meant the world to me. He is responsible for whoever I am and what I am, if I am anything. He directed me in Over the Edge, and after that we got together as a couple. And I grew up kind of like a weed in my house in Montclair, New Jersey. My parents just sort of opened the door, you know, from the time we were 3 or whatever, and, you know, off we went, and they threw water out once in a while and maybe some fertilizer. So I didn't know much when I came to Hollywood. And Jonathan taught me everything, beginning with a hug lesson. So Jonathan, I was hugging him and my family, you hugged like this. Pat, 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 done, right? He said, no, we're gonna have a hug lesson. So I, sort of tried to relax myself, and he held on, and I got really uncomfortable in the hug, and then he said, no, we're hugging. We keep going, right? This is a hug. And truly, he did teach me to hug. And he taught me so many, many, many things after that. And he was a spark, as we all know, in life, that many of us gravitated to. And I'm so grateful. From the time he taught me to hug, to learning about films, to him sending me to a shrink, to watching him take care of a friend who had, it was a French name for the disease he had. Guillain-Barré, yeah, that was it, yeah. His friend Milam. And was in the hospital for a really long time, seemingly in a coma. But he wasn't in a coma. He could hear and understand everything. He just couldn't move or speak. And Jonathan went there like every day. And I was stunned at his devotion. And that taught me, too, how you show up for your friends. And really, I don't know who I would be without him. I'm forever grateful. And I also think that I knew his parents, I knew his family really well. And I think that the people that spoke today spoke so beautifully. All of you, and thank you, I'll carry with me the rest of my life.
My name is Dave Comides. I hadn't planned on speaking, but there's this part of me that thinks that Jonathan is looking down, so happy that everybody's here and pissed off that we're all talking about him. So the appropriate thing would be to say something. I met Jonathan when I was 27. I was the camera operator on ER, and this guy shows up, and of course this is pre-internet. You have to remember that, so you can't look anything up. I don't know who he is. And he's this big blustery guy, and he's kind of hanging out watching things. And I used to say to the new directors, because we were doing Steadicam on ER like people didn't really do, hey, if you want to come on the weekends, I can get us in here and walk through. Yeah. So we show up, and I'm just listening and whatever, and at one point I remember he said, what do you think? And I remember thinking, what does who think? And he said, what do you think? You know what you're doing here? And I said, well, I mean, no, but what do you think of this? And I stupidly was honest with him, and he said, I don't know whether he was testing me or not. He goes, no, that's a better idea, or whatever. And then we started going through stuff, and this and that and the other. And then at the end of it, because I guess he was directing the following week, he said, so when are you directing? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you shoot this show, you should be directing this show. And I was like, I don't know. And he goes, I'm going upstairs to talk to them. And I was like, be quiet. So that sort of goes away, and then I found out that he has been talking to them, and then a year later, at 28 and a half, they offered me a chance to direct, and Jonathan was right by my side. And I remember going upstairs and going, I don't know what I'm doing. And he said, of course you know what you're doing, you just don't know how it's done yet. And I said, okay. And I remember he was sitting in his office, and I said, what's the production meeting? Bullshit. What's the tone meeting? It's bullshit. What's the props meeting? Okay, the props meeting you gotta listen to, I'll be in there with you. I'll be in there with other things. So then we go into the tone meeting, and the tone meeting is where you sit with the writer, and the writer tells you everything, and they go through the script word by word. And Jonathan's sitting there, and excuse me for a sec, but he's doing this. And the eyes are closing, and I'm realizing, oh great, I'm in here and with him, and he's supposed to be my advocate, and he's sort of falling asleep. And he's doing that, and I'm listening, and every once in a while he would turn to go, well, what about the blah, 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 and then he'd go off into it, and I realized he had this catalog of things that he thought were problems that he had already decided that he was going to talk about. He was just waiting for them to come up, and he was there. So then on the first day of directing, he was there on his Apple Watch. Remember his Apple Watch that he used to he was there. That's fantastic. Should be in a museum somewhere. That's fantastic. Actually, no, it should be in the living room somewhere. But he was there the entire day, and he would basically just every once in a while and go, or he'd go, or something like that. But he didn't tell me what to do. He did not push me anyway. He was just there. And at one point, some of the people in the room will remember our UPM, Mike Solmanovich, would came on stage because you could hear his hearing aid going off in the background. And as I was getting close to the 12-hour mark, and I remember Jonathan basically got up off of his thing and walked, Mike, we got to talk about stage 3. We got a big problem on stage 3. And he walks around and he turned back and went like that. And I realized what he was doing. And then at the end of the day, I said, hey, thank you so much. He goes, no problem. And he said, tomorrow you make your day. I said, great, so I'll see you in the morning. And he said, no, you're the director. You don't need me here. You'll do fine. I'll be upstairs. And he would come in and visit. But that's just the kind of guy Jonathan was. It occurs to me, can everybody in the room who Jonathan helped your career in some way put your hands up? This is only a fraction of the people, right? And then everybody else who Jonathan helped in some other way. He was just the most amazing guy. And I kept in touch with him throughout my career. I would go to him constantly to ask him questions, and he would always just see through the problem that I was coming up with and go, that's the answer right there. He was just unbelievable that way. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of film, which just blew me away. And as we get older, I would pick him up, and before I left California, we'd go to like a deli, and I remember he'd get out of the car and I'd go, oh, you wore the black outfit today. Fuck you. And we go in and we order, and I'm a vegetarian, so I didn't eat eating some big corned beef something, and he'd say, are you sure you're Jewish? And then we'd hang out and I'd tell him stories because he wasn't working anymore about the industry that he would just shake his head, and it was just the best thing in the world. I just really miss him. He was a huge part of my life, and I wouldn't be the person I think that I am on many levels if I didn't know Jonathan the way that I did. Excuse me. He was a mensch. He was a really, really fine individual, and I don't think there's anybody in the world that I enjoyed having yell at me the way that I did. It's the best thing in the world, and the thing that I missed more than anything was making him laugh, because he had this amazing laugh, and his eyes would open up, and it was made Jonathan laugh. Like, to me, you accomplished something. And, there's a big hole in my heart where that's not. So, thank you.
We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Yeah, the bonnie boat was one as we sailed into the mystic. Oh, I can now hear the sailors cry, smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly into the mystic. And where that foghorn blows, I will be coming home.